I realized something was profoundly wrong at 2 in the morning when the cold bathroom tile pressed against my cheek, and the medical alert pendant around my neck hung dead and silent as a stone. The dizziness had come fast, the way these things do when you are 64, and your blood pressure medication decides to work a little too well at exactly the wrong moment. One second, I was standing at the sink reaching for my toothbrush, and the next, the floor was rising up to meet me like an old enemy I had forgotten to guard against. The impact sent pain radiating through my hip, sharp and immediate, the kind that makes you gasp even when there is no one around to hear it. I lay there in the darkness, listening to my own ragged breathing, waiting for the pendant to activate. The pendant Tom had insisted I wear after his heart attack. The pendant that was supposed to connect me to emergency services at the press of a button. The pendant that I had charged religiously every single night for 3 years. Except last night. Or was it the night before? The truth settled over me as heavy as the pain. I could not remember the last time I had plugged it in. 20 minutes I spent on that floor. I know because I could see the digital clock on the sink counter, its green numbers mocking me with each slow minute that crawled past. 20 minutes of being utterly, completely alone. 20 minutes of thinking about Tom, who had died the same way, alone in his workshop while I slept upstairs, his heart simply stopping while he reached for a wrench. 20 minutes of understanding, truly understanding, that at 64 years old I had made myself so small, so invisible, that I could disappear entirely, and no one would notice until morning. But something else caught my attention as I lay there, something that cut through the pain and the fear and the shame. Through the bathroom window, I could see the electric meter on the side of the house. Even in the darkness, even from this angle, I could see it spinning. Not the slow, occasional tick of a refrigerator cycling on. This was fast, hungry, continuous, like something was feeding on my electricity with an appetite that did not sleep. That was wrong. Everything in my house was off. Emma was asleep downstairs in what used to be Tom's study. The heat was set low. The lights were dark. There was no reason for that meter to be moving at all, much less spinning like a prayer wheel in the hands of someone desperate for redemption. I managed to crawl. That is not something you think you will have to do at 64, not in your own home, not in the bathroom where you brush your teeth and wash your face and tell yourself in the mirror that you are fine. Everything is fine. You are managing. But I crawled inch by painful inch across the tile and through the hallway to my bedroom where my phone sat charging on the nightstand exactly where it always was. The phone Tom used to check every morning, testing the battery percentage like it was a vital sign, making sure I was connected, making sure I was safe. The phone I now checked myself, trying to honor his memory by being responsible, by being careful, by being the kind of woman who does not fall on bathroom floors at 2 in the morning. I pulled myself up onto the bed and sat there, phone in hand, not calling anyone, not Emma, asleep 2 rooms away, not 911, which would send strangers to see me at my most vulnerable, not my daughter's ghost, though God knows I wanted to talk to Sarah. Wanted to hear her voice tell me that raising Emma alone was not too much, that I was doing okay, that falling down did not mean falling apart. Instead, I sat in the silence and looked out the window at that spinning meter and felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Anger, not the sharp, hot kind that burns out quickly, the slow kind, the kind that builds like water behind a dam. Someone was taking something from me. Someone thought I would not notice. Someone thought I was exactly what I had spent 3 years proving I was. Invisible, silent, too polite to make trouble. The morning light found me still sitting there, hip throbbing, pendant dead, phone clutched in my hand. I heard Emma moving around downstairs, the particular rhythm of her morning routine. Coffee first, always coffee. Then the sound of her laptop opening, the soft click of keys as she worked on the college applications that consumed her every waking moment. I should have called out to her. Should have asked for help. Should have done what any reasonable person would do. Instead, I stood up slowly, testing my weight on my bruised hip, and walked to the bathroom to wash my face. In the mirror, I looked exactly like what I was, a 64-year-old widow with gray hair she kept meaning to color, and lines around her eyes from 40 years of smiling at other people's children, and a bruise forming on her cheekbone from where it had hit the tile. I looked like someone who could be taken advantage of. I looked like someone who would not fight back. Tom's reading glasses still sat on his side of the sink. 3 years and I had not moved them. His bathrobe still hung on the back of the door. His cologne, almost empty now, still stood on the shelf. I had frozen this house in amber, preserving everything exactly as it was the morning he walked out to his workshop and did not walk back. As if keeping his things in place could somehow keep him here too. As if changing anything would mean admitting he was really gone. Emma found me 20 minutes later, standing in the kitchen staring at the coffee maker like I had forgotten how it worked. She looked at me with those dark eyes that were so much like her mother's, so much like my Sarah's. And I watched her face change as she registered the bruise. "How long have you been up?" she asked, and there was something in her voice that I recognized. The same tone I used to use with my students when I knew they were lying, but wanted to give them a chance to tell the truth. "I fell," I said. "In the bathroom, I'm fine." The silence that followed was the kind that says more than words ever could. Emma set down her coffee mug, the one with the MIT logo that she carried everywhere like a talisman, and crossed the kitchen to stand directly in front of me. She was 16, but in that moment she looked ancient, burdened with a wisdom that came from losing both her parents 2 years ago in a car accident that should not have happened, that could have been avoided if the other driver had not been texting, if the roads had not been wet, if the universe had any sense of fairness at all. "Why didn't you call me?" she asked. "I was right downstairs." "I did not want to bother you." She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, I saw something that made my chest tight. Disappointment. Not the sharp kind, the weary kind, the kind that says this is not the first time and it will not be the last. "Grandma," she said, and her voice was so gentle it hurt worse than the fall. "That is your problem. You think asking for help is weakness." I started to protest, but she held up her hand, and I realized with a shock that somewhere in the last 2 years Emma had stopped being a child I was raising and become a person with her own gravity, her own truth. "You do this with everything," she continued. "The bills, the yard work, the car maintenance. You act like if you ask for help, you are admitting you can't handle things. But you can't handle everything. Nobody can." I opened my mouth and then closed it again, because she was right. When had I become this person? When had I decided that struggling alone was better than reaching out? Had it been when Tom died, or had it started long before that, back in my teaching days when I took on extra duties without complaint, stayed late to help struggling students without asking for compensation, smiled through parent conferences where I was blamed for their children's failures? Had it been in my marriage, where Tom made the decisions and I went along, where his comfort came before mine, where I learned that my needs were always second priority? "The electric bill is wrong," I said instead, because it was easier to talk about concrete problems than invisible wounds. "It came yesterday, $847. Emma's eyes widened. "We never pay more than $300. "I know." She picked up the envelope from the counter where I had left it, unopened, because that is what I did with things that scared me. She pulled out the bill and I watched her face as she scanned the numbers, as she did the math that I had been too afraid to do. "This is almost triple," she said. "What happened?" "I do not know. I thought maybe I had done something wrong." "Stop," Emma said, and there was steel in her voice now. "Stop doing that. Why is your first thought that you are the problem?" "Because," I wanted to say, because that is what I have learned. Because for 64 years, I have been taught that when something goes wrong, when someone is unhappy, when there is conflict, it must be something I did or did not do. Because being a woman means carrying the weight of everyone else's comfort on your shoulders and smiling while you do it. Because I have spent my whole life making myself smaller so that other people could feel bigger. But I did not say any of that. Instead, I said, "We should check the appliances. Maybe something is broken." We spent the next hour going through the house together. Emma with her laptop open, researching average energy usage for refrigerators and washing machines and water heaters. Me with a notepad, writing down serial numbers and model numbers with the careful precision of a teacher grading papers. We checked everything. The refrigerator that Tom and I had bought 15 years ago, still running strong. The washer and dryer I had replaced just last year. The air conditioning unit that barely ran at all now that it was November in Arizona. Nothing explained it. Nothing came close. I have been noticing something else, Emma said as we stood in the garage staring at the circuit breaker panel. The internet has been really slow in the evenings, like unusable. I have been trying to upload my portfolio for MIT, and it keeps timing out. When did that start? I asked. Maybe a month ago. I thought it was just our provider being terrible. The internet, the electricity. Two things that should not be connected but somehow felt like they were. I remembered Tom explaining to me once how everything in a modern home was linked, how power and data and communication all flowed through invisible channels we took for granted until they stopped working. He would have known what to do. He would have called someone, filed a complaint, demanded answers. He would have protected us. But Tom was gone, and I was here, and I did not know how to be the kind of person who demanded things. Emma pulled up something on her phone. "Oh," she said. "That reminds me. There is this community Wi-Fi thing now. Did you know about that?" Number, what community Wi-Fi? It just appeared last month. Free internet for everyone in the HOA. I have been using it sometimes when ours is slow. It is actually pretty fast. Something cold settled in my stomach. Did I agree to that? Did the HOA ask permission? Emma shrugged. I do not know. I thought they must have announced it at a meeting or something. I had not been to an HOA meeting in 6 months. The last one I attended, Patricia Morrison had spent 45 minutes explaining new landscaping requirements in that clipped, efficient voice of hers. And I had sat in the back row feeling invisible and judged and desperately wishing I was anywhere else. Large groups made me anxious. Always had. The thought of speaking up, of disagreeing, of drawing attention to myself made my throat close up. So I stayed home and told myself it did not matter, that the meetings were just formalities anyway, that my vote would not change anything. Now I wondered what I had missed. We need to look at the property line, I said. Emma and I walked the perimeter of our lot together. The house sat on what the HOA called a transition property. The last home before the development gave way to undeveloped land, and the desert took over again. When Tom and I bought it 10 years ago from his uncle who was moving into assisted living, we loved the privacy of it, the way we backed up to nothing but scrub brush and sky. Now, as we walked the fence line, I saw something I had not noticed before. A metal cabinet, new, industrial, bolted to a concrete pad just beyond our property line, but definitely within the HOA easement. It was about the size of a refrigerator, painted beige to blend in, locked with a serious padlock. A small placard on the front read, Meadowbrook Community Network Infrastructure. That was not here before, Emma said. No, I agreed, it was not. I walked closer, my teacher's instincts kicking in, the same instincts I used to use when I found contraband in a student's backpack. Look for the details. Follow the connections. I traced the conduit that ran from the base of the cabinet, thick and professional, disappearing into the ground. I followed its path with my eyes, reading the slight disruption in the dirt, until I realized with a sick certainty exactly where it was going. It ran straight to my house. More specifically, it ran to the junction box on the side of my house, where Tom's uncle had installed upgraded electrical service for his woodworking business. 400 amp service, massive by residential standards, installed legally and permitted and paid for. More than enough capacity to power not just a house but a workshop full of industrial tools, or a network of wireless access points serving an entire neighborhood. I felt Emma's hand on my arm. Grandma, she said quietly, do you think they are using our electricity? I think someone is taking something that does not belong to them, I said, and they are counting on me being too afraid to do anything about it. That afternoon, I did something I had not done in years. I knocked on my neighbor's door. Diane Webb lived 3 houses down in a neat brick ranch with a garden that put everyone else's to shame. She was 69, a retired nurse, a widow like me, though she had been one much longer. We knew each other the way neighbors do, waves across driveways and polite comments about weather. But we had never been close. There was something about Diane that intimidated me. A directness, a way of looking at you that suggested she could see through whatever performance you were putting on straight to the truth underneath. She answered the door in gardening gloves, dirt smudged on her cheek, and looked at me with those keen eyes that missed nothing. Margaret Chen, she said. I wondered when you would come talk to me. The use of my full name instead of Maggie, which is what everyone called me, felt deliberate, like she was reminding me of something I had forgotten, that I had a full name, a full self, not just the diminutive version people preferred. "You knew about the electricity," I said. I suspected. "Come in. You look like you need to sit down." Her living room was nothing like mine, where I had preserved Tom's presence in every untouched corner. Diane had clearly moved on from whoever her life before had been. The furniture was comfortable but not precious. The walls held art that was vibrant and alive. Everything spoke of a woman who had decided what she wanted her space to feel like and made it so. She brought me tea without asking if I wanted any, set it in front of me with a plate of homemade cookies, and sat down across from me with the kind of focused attention that made me want to confess things. "How long have you known?" I asked. "That Patricia Morrison is taking advantage of your electrical service." "About 3 weeks. I noticed the cabinet going in." Asked the contractor about it. He was cagey but let slip it was tied into a residential service. Only one house on this end has the kind of capacity they would need. "Why did you not tell me?" She gave me a look that was surprisingly gentle. "Would you have believed me 3 weeks ago? Or would you have told yourself I was mistaken? That surely no one would do something like that without asking? That you must be misunderstanding the situation?" I felt my face flush because she was absolutely right. 3 weeks ago, I would have made excuses for Patricia, would have convinced myself there was a reasonable explanation, would have done anything to avoid confrontation. "How did you know I would come today?" I asked. "Because yesterday you fell in your bathroom and spent 20 minutes on the floor alone." "I know because my bedroom window faces yours and I saw your bathroom light on at 2 in the morning, saw it go dark, saw it stay dark for longer than normal. And I thought, either Margaret Chen is dead or she has finally hit whatever bottom she needed to hit to get angry." I stared at her. "You saw me fall and did not come check on me?" If I had come running over, it would have reinforced exactly the story you tell yourself, that you are fragile, that you need rescuing, that you cannot handle your own life. But that is not true. You are not fragile. You are afraid. There is a difference. I set down my teacup before I could drop it. Something about Diane's words was cracking something open inside me, something I had kept sealed for so long I had forgotten it was there. "I do not know how to fight someone like Patricia Morrison," I said, and my voice came out smaller than I intended. "She is so confident, so certain, so in control." Diane leaned forward, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of hard-earned truth. "Margaret, may I tell you something about myself? Something I do not usually share?" I nodded. I was married for 23 years to a man who hit me, not every day, not even every month. Just often enough that I learned to read the signs, learned to make myself smaller, learned to apologize for things that were not my fault, and agree to things I did not want and stay silent when I should have screamed. I learned that keeping the peace meant sacrificing myself, and I got very, very good at it. She paused, letting that sink in. "I finally left him when I was 50. That was 19 years ago. And you know what the hardest part was? It was not leaving. It was learning to take up space again, learning to say no, learning to believe that my needs mattered as much as anyone else's. It took me years, actual years, and I still have to practice it." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I look at you and I see myself at 50. Not with a husband who hits, but with a lifetime of learning to be accommodating, to be nice, to not make waves. Your kindness has been weaponized against you, Margaret." Patricia Morrison looked at you and saw exactly what I used to see in the mirror, someone who would not fight back. "That hurts," I said. "Good. It should. Now let it make you angry instead of ashamed." She stood up and retrieved a folder from her desk, brought it back and opened it in front of me. Inside were documents, lots of them. HOA meeting minutes, financial reports, communications from Patricia. "I have been fighting Patricia Morrison for 6 years, Diane said. Over different things. She tried to fine me for my garden exceeding height regulations, tried to make me remove my solar panels, tried to convince me I needed to attend board meetings or face penalties. Every single time I have pushed back. Every single time she has backed down. Because bullies fold when you stand up to them." She pushed one particular document toward me. It was an email chain. "This is from 2 months ago. Patricia sent this to every homeowner on the edge lots. See what it says? I read it carefully. It was a notification about proposed infrastructure improvements to enhance property connectivity. Vague language. Nothing specific about electrical access or permissions required. Just bureaucratic soup that could mean anything or nothing. She sent this to me too, I said slowly. Did you read it? I felt my face heat. Probably not. I get so many HOA emails, I usually just delete them. She gets away with it because she counts on people like us not reading the fine print, not asking questions, not making trouble. She is not stupid, Margaret. She is strategic. And she targets women specifically. Women she thinks will not push back. That's when Diane showed me something else. A list of names. 11 women, all living in homes on the periphery of the development. All of them had received similar vague notifications about various projects. All of them had been asked to volunteer, donate, or accommodate in ways that benefited Patricia's vision for the community. All of them had complied. I realized I was looking at a pattern, not isolated incidents, but a systematic approach. Patricia Morrison had built an empire of yes out of women who had been trained their whole lives to say it. What do I do? I asked. You decide you are worth fighting for, Diane said simply. Your electricity, your property, your voice, they all matter, and then you tell Patricia Morrison no. The word felt foreign in my mouth. No. When was the last time I had said it and meant it? Not to Emma about staying up too late or eating too much sugar. Not to a telemarketer or a solicitor. But to someone I knew. Someone in my community. Someone who would remember and judge and possibly retaliate. I do not know if I can, I admitted. Then I will teach you, Diane said. But Margaret, you have to decide you are worth the discomfort. Because standing up for yourself is uncomfortable. It makes people unhappy. It disrupts the peace. And women our age, we were raised to value peace above everything, even ourselves. She was right. I knew she was right. But knowing and doing are different countries separated by an ocean of fear. I went home that evening with Diane's words circling in my head, and found Emma on the front porch using the community Wi-Fi to upload her college application materials. The irony was not lost on me. My granddaughter's future, powered by my stolen electricity, facilitated by my silence. Emma looked up as I approached. Any luck? I talked to Diane Webb. She thinks Patricia Morrison is using our electricity without permission to power the neighborhood internet. Emma's eyes widened. That is insane. Can she do that? She cannot, but she is. So what are you going to do? The question hung between us in the cooling evening air. What was I going to do? That was the question, was not it. Not what should happen, or what was right, or what Tom would have done. What was I, Margaret Chen, going to do about it? Before I could answer, a car pulled into my driveway. An expensive SUV, black and gleaming, with the kind of aggressive confidence that announces its owner arrived. I knew that car. Everyone in the HOA knew that car. Patricia Morrison had come to me. She stepped out looking exactly like she always did. 58 years old, but could pass for 50. Blonde hair that probably cost more to maintain than my monthly grocery budget. Clothes that spoke of tasteful wealth without being ostentatious. She carried a clipboard. Patricia always carried a clipboard. I used to think it was because she was organized. Now I wondered if it was armor. Margaret, she called out, warm and friendly, like we were old friends instead of barely acquaintances. I am so glad I caught you. I wanted to personally thank you for your cooperation with the Community Wi-Fi initiative. I stood there on my porch with Emma beside me and felt the old familiar pull, the pull to smile, to agree, to make this easy for her, to not create conflict. Patricia was standing in my driveway thanking me for something I had not agreed to, and my first instinct was to tell her she was welcome. Diane's voice echoed in my head. Your kindness has been weaponized against you. I did not agree to anything, I said, and was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Patricia's smile did not waver, but something shifted in her eyes. Oh, did Tom not mention it? We discussed this years ago, when he was thinking of selling the house to you. He was very community-minded, always thinking about how to help others. The mention of Tom was deliberate. I could feel it. She was reminding me that Tom made the decisions, that Tom was the authority, that I was just the widow who inherited his choices without the wisdom to understand them. Tom never mentioned any such agreement, I said. Well, she said, and her tone suggested I was either lying or confused. Perhaps he did not want to burden you with the details. Men of that generation were protective that way, were not they? They handled these matters so their wives did not have to worry about complicated things. Emma made a sound beside me that might have been a laugh or might have been a scoff. Patricia ignored her, keeping her focus on me, clipboard held like a shield. The community Wi-Fi initiative is so important, she continued. We have families working from home now, children doing remote learning, elderly residents who need telehealth services. Surely you understand how vital connectivity is, Margaret. As a teacher, you know how important internet access is for students. She was good at this. I had to give her that. She had found my soft spot, my identity as an educator, and was pressing on it. How could I, a retired English teacher who spent 40 years trying to give students every advantage, stand in the way of children's education? But there was something else in her words too, something that made my spine straighten. She had mentioned Emma, not by name, not directly, but the reference to students and education while my granddaughter stood right there felt like a threat disguised as concern. I would hate for Emma's college applications to suffer from poor connectivity, Patricia said. And there it was, the knife wrapped in silk, the reminder that she could make things difficult for us if I did not cooperate. Emma stepped forward before I could respond. Mrs. Morrison, she said, and her voice had a bite to it I had never heard before. My college applications are none of your business, and using me to manipulate my grandmother is gross. Patricia's smile tightened. I am simply pointing out that we all benefit from community cooperation. We are all in this together. No, I said, and the word came out stronger this time. We are not. You made a decision that affects my property and my finances without my consent. That is not community cooperation. That is theft. The smile finally cracked. Margaret, she said, and now her voice had an edge. I understand you are upset. Widowhood is difficult. Managing a household alone is overwhelming. Perhaps you are not thinking clearly about what is best for the community. There it was, the dismissal, the suggestion that my grief made me irrational, that my widowhood made me incompetent, that without a man to guide me, I could not possibly understand complex matters like community infrastructure. Something inside me broke, not shattered, but cracked open like an egg, and what came out was not weakness, but fury. Get off my property, I said. Patricia blinked. Excuse me? I said, get off my property. You do not have permission to be here. You do not have permission to use my electricity. You do not have permission to manipulate me by threatening my granddaughter's future. You have nothing I have consented to give you. So get off my property and do not come back until you are prepared to have an honest conversation about what you have done. For a long moment, Patricia just stared at me. I could see her recalculating, trying to find the angle that would bring me back into compliance. But something in my face must have told her it would not work because she took a step back toward her car. This is not over, she said. You are right, I replied. It is not, because I am going to find out exactly what you have done, and I am going to hold you accountable for it. Women like us have to hold communities together, Patricia said, and it sounded almost desperate. We cannot afford to be divided. Then you should not have divided us by stealing from me. She got in her car and drove away, and I stood there shaking, Emma's hand in mine, feeling like I had just jumped off a cliff and was still waiting to see if I could fly or if I was about to hit the ground. That was amazing, Emma said. Grandma, that was so badass. I just told Patricia Morrison to get off my property, I said, mostly to myself, trying to make it real. Yes, you did. I might throw up. Emma laughed and hugged me, and over her shoulder, I saw Diane Webb standing in her own driveway 3 houses down, watching. When she caught my eye, she raised her hand in a small salute, a warrior acknowledging another warrior, a woman who knew exactly how much that confrontation had cost me and exactly how much it was worth. That night I could not sleep. I kept replaying the conversation with Patricia, kept hearing my own voice saying no, kept feeling the strange, terrifying exhilaration of it. But under the adrenaline was fear. What had I just started? What would Patricia do now? What if I was wrong? What if there was some agreement I did not know about? What if Tom really had promised something and I was dishonoring his memory by fighting it? At midnight, I got up and went to Tom's desk. I had not touched it in 3 years, had left it exactly as he left it the morning he died. Papers in neat stacks, pens in the cup, reading glasses folded on top of a woodworking magazine. I sat in his chair and felt like an intruder in my own home. I went through every drawer, every file folder, every scrap of paper, looking for anything about the HOA, about electrical agreements, about Patricia Morrison. I found our closing documents from when we bought the house from Tom's uncle. I found HOA bylaws and boring meeting minutes and reminders about dues. I found nothing about community Wi-Fi or electrical access or any kind of permission given. What I did find, in the very back of the bottom drawer, was an envelope with my name on it in Tom's handwriting. Margaret, it said, in case something happens to me. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter dated 2 weeks before he died. I recognized his careful handwriting, the way he pressed hard with the pen like he was carving truth into stone. "My dearest Margaret," it began, "if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you are alone, and I am so sorry. I always thought I would have time to teach you everything you needed to know about the house, the finances, the decisions I made. But I realize now I should have involved you all along instead of protecting you from things I thought were burdens. There are some things you should know. The HOA President, Patricia Morrison, approached me last year about using our electrical service for a community emergency communication system. Just in case of natural disasters, she said. Temporary backup power. I told her I would think about it. Then she kept pushing, kept expanding what she wanted, kept assuming I had already agreed. I finally told her no, that if she wanted access to our property, she needed to put it in writing, get proper approvals, and involve you in the decision since this is your home too. She was not happy with that answer. She told me I was being unreasonable, that men like me should be more community-minded. That did not sit right with me, so I want you to know, I never agreed to anything. If she claims otherwise after I am gone, she is lying. Trust yourself. Stand up for yourself. You are stronger than you think you are. I am sorry I did not tell you that enough when I was alive. I love you. Protect yourself and protect Emma. You do not need me to do that. You never did. I sat there holding his letter and crying harder than I had cried since the day he died. Not because I missed him, though I did, but because even from the grave he was trying to protect me, still assuming I needed protection instead of partnership. And because in his last written words to me, he had finally told me what I needed to hear, that I was strong enough, that I could trust myself, that I did not need him to fight my battles. Patricia had lied. She had manipulated me using Tom's memory. And somewhere in the 3 years since his death, somewhere in the fog of grief and the weight of raising Emma alone and the fear of making wrong choices, I had let her. Not anymore. The next morning, I did what Diane had suggested. I started documenting everything. I took photos of the metal cabinet, the conduit, the connection point to my house. I printed out my electric bills from the last 6 months and highlighted the spike. I saved Patricia's vague email about infrastructure improvements. I wrote down everything she had said to me, word for word as best as I could remember. And then I called the power company. The woman who answered was professional and bored until I explained the situation. Then her voice changed. She put me on hold, came back 3 minutes later with someone else, a supervisor, male, efficient. "Mrs. Chen," he said, "let me make sure I understand. You believe someone has tapped into your electrical service without your permission to power unauthorized equipment?" "Yes." "And you have documentation of unusual usage patterns?" "Yes. My bill has nearly tripled in the last 2 months." There was a pause, and then he said something that made my blood run cold. "Mrs. Chen, your property has been flagged in our system for 6 months as a possible commercial operation. We have been monitoring your usage because it exceeds normal residential parameters. If you are running a business out of your home, you need to apply for commercial service rates." "I'm not running a business." "Then we need to investigate, because if someone else is using your meter for commercial purposes, that is theft of services. And that is serious." "How serious?" "Criminal charges serious. We will send an inspector out within 48 hours. In the meantime, do not touch anything. Do not confront anyone. Let us handle it." After I hung up, I sat very still, trying to process what I had just learned. For 6 months, the power company had been watching my house. For 6 months, they had thought I was running some kind of illegal business. For 6 months, Patricia Morrison's scheme had been pushing me toward consequences I did not even know existed. If this had gone on much longer, if I had stayed silent much longer, I could have faced criminal charges. I could have lost my home. I could have lost Emma. Emma came into the kitchen and found me sitting there, phone in hand, probably pale as death. "Grandma, what happened?" I told her. I watched her face go through the same progression mine had. Confusion, understanding, fury. "She could have destroyed us," Emma said. "She could have gotten you arrested, and she just did not care. I think she convinced herself she was doing the right thing, that the community need justify the individual cost, that I would never find out, or if I did, I would not fight back." "Well, she was wrong," Emma said fiercely. "You are fighting back, and I am helping." That afternoon, Diane came over with 2 other women I knew from the neighborhood. Rita and Joan, both in their 60s, both widows, both with stories about Patricia Morrison pushing them into things they had not wanted to agree to. They sat in my living room drinking coffee and comparing notes, and I realized we were forming something. Not a rebellion, something quieter, but maybe more powerful. A recognition that we were not alone, that the thing we each thought was just our individual weakness was actually a pattern, a system designed to extract our compliance. There was comfort in that and rage in that, and something else too: possibility. Patricia Morrison had spent years building power by isolating us, by making each of us think we were the only ones struggling with her demands, by weaponizing our socialization to be nice, to accommodate, to not make waves. But now we were talking, now we were comparing notes, now we were not alone, and that, I was beginning to understand, was the thing she should have feared most. The power between us, I thought, watching these women who had been strangers become allies. Not the power she held over us, the power we held between us when we finally stopped competing and started collaborating. It was just beginning. The investigation, the confrontation, the consequences. But sitting in my living room surrounded by women who had decided they were worth fighting for, I felt something I had not felt since Tom died. I felt ready. The power company inspector arrived on a Tuesday morning when the desert sun was still gentle and the air smelled like creosote and possibility. His name was James Rodriguez, and he had the kind of weathered face that spoke of 30 years spent outdoors in Arizona heat, reading meters and chasing down electricity thieves, and probably seeing every variation of human dishonesty there was to see. He shook my hand with the firm grip of someone who believed handshakes still mattered, and looked at me with eyes that were kind, but had definitely seen some things. "Mrs. Chen," he said, "I understand you have some concerns about unauthorized usage of your electrical service." I showed him everything: the cabinet, the conduit, the junction box where Tom's uncle had installed that massive 400-amp panel for his woodworking business. I showed him my bills from the last 6 months, the spike so obvious it looked like a heart rate monitor during a panic attack. I showed him the timeline, how it all correlated with the appearance of the community Wi-Fi that I had never agreed to. James took photos of everything with a tablet that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. He used some kind of meter that clicked and hummed when he held it near the junction box. He traced the conduit with his fingers like he was reading Braille, following the story of how someone had very professionally, very deliberately, very illegally tapped into my power. After 40 minutes, he stood up and looked at me with something that might have been respect or might have been pity. "Mrs. Chen, this is sophisticated theft. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. This is not some amateur hour wire splicing. This is professional-grade electrical work." "Is it dangerous?" I asked, because that was the question that kept me awake at night now. Emma sleeping 2 rooms away from a junction box that was feeding power to half the neighborhood. James pulled out his thermal imaging camera, something that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie, and pointed it at my wall. The screen showed oranges and reds and yellows, heat signatures blooming like dangerous flowers. "See this," he said, turning the screen so I could see. "Your wall cavity is running 15 degrees hotter than ambient. That is a fire hazard, not might be. The words hit me like a physical thing. Fire hazard. Emma's bedroom was directly above that wall. If something had happened, if the insulation had caught, if we had been asleep. I must have gone pale because James put his hand on my shoulder, gentle, the way you steady someone who is about to fall. Mrs. Chen, I need you to listen to me carefully. This installation violates multiple codes. Whoever authorized this could face criminal charges. If you are running a business here, now is the time to tell me. I am not running a business. Someone else is using my power without my permission, and I only just found out. Then you are a victim, not a perpetrator. But I need to ask, do you know who installed this? I shook my head. Patricia Morrison, the HOA president, said she had a contractor do it, but I do not have a name. I will need to trace the permits. Any electrical work like this requires permits, licensed contractors, inspections. If those do not exist, we have bigger problems. He spent another hour documenting everything, taking measurements, filling out forms on his tablet with the methodical precision of someone building a case. When he finally finished, he handed me a printed report and his business card. I am red tagging this installation. That means it needs to be shut down immediately. I am also filing a formal complaint with the State Contractors Board and referring this to our fraud investigation unit. Expect a call from them within 72 hours. What happens next? I asked. Next, we find out who is responsible, and then we hold them accountable. After he left, I sat on my porch steps holding that red tag notice and feeling the weight of what I had just put into motion. This was not a neighborhood dispute anymore. This was criminal investigation territory. This was the kind of thing that destroyed people. Part of me wanted to call James back, tell him to forget it, smooth it over somehow. That part of me that had spent 64 years avoiding conflict, keeping peace, making sure everyone else was comfortable even when I was bleeding inside. But there was another part now, a newer part, a part that had spent 20 minutes alone on a bathroom floor and decided enough was enough. That afternoon, Linda Chang appeared at my door. I knew Linda the way you know people in an HOA. Pleasant nods at the mailbox, compliments about her immaculate lawn. She was 58, a retired CPA who lived alone in a house 3 streets over and kept to herself in a way I recognized. The way women do when they have learned that being visible means being vulnerable. She was carrying a folder. Everyone in this story seemed to carry folders. "Margaret," she said, "may I come in? I have something you need to see." We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Tom used to read the morning paper, where Emma now did her homework, where I had spent countless meals in silence telling myself I was fine. Linda opened her folder with the careful precision of someone who had spent a career making numbers tell stories. "I have been analyzing the HOA financial records," she said. "It is what I do. Cannot help myself. Old habits." She spread out printouts, spreadsheets, highlighted sections that meant nothing to me, but clearly meant everything to her. "The HOA is not just in trouble, Margaret. It is technically insolvent. The reserve fund should be at $180,000 by law. It is currently at $18,000. I stared at the numbers. How's that possible? Patricia Morrison has been moving money around for years, borrowing from reserves for operating expenses, deferring maintenance, using creative accounting to make it look better than it is. And then there is this." She pointed to a highlighted section: payments to various medical providers, therapy centers, occupational health services, always in round numbers, always just under the reporting threshold. $31,000 over 2 years, all paid to providers that treat autism spectrum disorders. "Patricia's son," I said slowly. "Robert." Linda nodded. "She has been embezzling HOA funds to pay for his medical treatments. Insurance does not cover most of it. Out-of-pocket costs for intensive therapy can run $40,000–$50,000 a year. That is still theft. Yes, but there is more." Linda showed me another set of numbers. Personal credit card statements, bank records, things I did not understand how she had access to until she explained that some of it was public record from a lawsuit Patricia had been involved in years ago, and some of it had been anonymously sent to her by someone who clearly wanted this information out. Patricia has also put $95,000 of her own money into HOA repairs over the past 8 years. Roads, drainage, legal fees, fighting the developer. She has bled herself dry trying to keep this place running while refusing to raise dues or levy special assessments because she knew people could not afford it. I tried to process this. So she is a thief who paid more than she stole? Linda closed the folder and looked at me with tired eyes. "Margaret, I have been doing forensic accounting for 30 years. I have seen fraud, embezzlement, every variation of financial crime you can imagine. This is the most complicated case I have ever encountered. Because Patricia is stealing, yes, but she is also sacrificing. The question is, what do we do about it? What do you think we should do? I think we need to understand that this is not about one bad person. This is about a broken system, an HOA that was underfunded from the start, a community that wanted luxury amenities on a budget, a woman who tried to make impossible math work and ended up destroying herself in the process. That does not excuse what she did to me. No, Linda agreed. It does not. She violated you. She put Emma at risk. She needs to be held accountable. But if we destroy her completely, we are also destroying the community. Property values will crash. We will face massive special assessments. And Robert, who did not choose any of this, loses everything. So what are you saying? I am saying the answer is not simple. And I am saying I will support whatever you decide. But I wanted you to have all the information before you decided. After Linda left, I sat with those numbers for a long time. 31,000 stolen, 95,000 given, Emma at risk, Robert innocent, Patricia drowning, the community broke. Every angle I looked at it from, someone was bleeding. My phone rang, unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. Mrs. Chen? This is Sarah Kim. We are neighbors. I live on Cottonwood Drive. I was wondering if we could talk. Dr. Sarah Kim. I knew her by reputation. Pediatrician, single mother, divorced 3 years ago under circumstances no one talked about, but everyone seemed to know involved some kind of betrayal. She had a daughter Emma's age, and I had seen them together sometimes, walking their dog, laughing in a way that made me ache for what Sarah had lost and what Emma had never had. Of course, I said. Would you like to come over? She arrived 20 minutes later with a bottle of wine and the kind of smile that was trying very hard to be casual but was actually nervous as hell. She was 52 but looked younger. One of those women who carried stress invisibly until you looked closely and saw it in the tightness around her eyes, the way her hands never quite stayed still. I am just going to say it, she told me as we sat on my back patio watching the sun paint the desert the color of flame. I have been using the community Wi-Fi a lot. My practice allows me to work from home 2 days a week now, and the Wi-Fi has been a godsend. It saves me $80 a month, and more importantly, it means I can be home when Lily gets off the bus instead of rushing back from the office. She took a breath, and I could see this was hard for her. Marcus Webb told me you are fighting this, that the Wi-Fi is connected to your power and you never agreed to it. And I just wanted to say, I am so sorry. I should have questioned it. I should have wondered why it was free. But I was just so grateful for it, I did not want to look too closely. You did not know, but I benefited. And now I know. And I do not know what the right thing to do is. She looked at me and I saw something I recognized. The exhaustion of being a single mother, trying to hold everything together. The impossible math of making time and money and energy stretch far enough. The guilt of taking something you maybe should not have because you needed it so desperately. Can I tell you something? She asked. About my divorce. I nodded. My ex-husband controlled everything. The finances, the decisions, the thermostat settings. I could not buy groceries without explaining every item. When I finally left, I literally did not know how to open a bank account in my own name. I was 49 years old, and I had to Google how to write a check. I spent 3 years rebuilding my life, learning to make decisions, learning to trust myself, learning that asking for what I need is not weakness. And now I am in this weird place where I am financially stable but emotionally exhausted. And when that Wi-Fi appeared, it felt like the universe finally cutting me a break. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Turns out it was not the universe, it was you paying for it, and I hate that. I hate that I was taking from another woman without knowing it. We are supposed to support each other, not steal from each other. You did not steal, Patricia Morrison did, but I used it, that makes me complicit. We sat in silence for a while, watching the light change, and I felt something shifting. This was not just about electricity or money or HOA politics. This was about women navigating impossible systems, making impossible choices, trying to survive in a world that demanded we be everything to everyone, while taking nothing for ourselves. What would you do? Sarah asked. If you were me? I would tell the truth. I would acknowledge the harm. I would offer to make it right. And then I would forgive yourself because you are doing the best you can in circumstances that should not exist. Is that what you are doing, forgiving yourself? The question caught me off guard. Was I? I had spent 3 years frozen in grief, preserving Tom's memory by preserving everything exactly as he left it, as if my paralysis was loyalty. I had let Patricia Morrison walk all over me because confrontation felt impossible. I had made myself so small that I nearly disappeared. I am trying, I said. I am trying to believe I deserve better than what I have been accepting. Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. Then we are trying together. That night, Emma could not sleep. I heard her moving around downstairs at midnight and found her in the kitchen stress-eating cookies and staring at her laptop with the kind of intensity that meant college applications were eating her alive. I cannot get the portal to load, she said. The MIT supplemental essays are due in 6 days and our internet keeps cutting out. Use the community Wi-Fi. She looked at me like I had suggested she rob a bank. Grandma, that is your stolen electricity. It is electricity I am already paying for. We might as well use it until this gets resolved. I am not going to let Patricia Morrison's theft sabotage your future. She opened her mouth to argue and then closed it. Okay, thank you. I sat down across from her, watching her work, watching her face in the laptop glow. 16 years old, and carrying the weight of dead parents, and an uncertain future, and a grandmother who was just now learning how to fight. When had I stopped protecting her and started leaning on her? When had the roles reversed? Emma, I said, can I ask you something? Do you think I'm weak? She looked up startled. What? No. Why would you think that? Because I spent my whole life letting other people make decisions. Your grandfather, my principal, the HOA. I never stood up for myself until now. Emma closed her laptop with the kind of careful deliberation that meant she was choosing her words carefully. Grandma, I do not think you were weak. I think you were tired. I think the world tells women they have to be nice and accommodating, and if they are not, they are bitches. I think you survived by being what people needed you to be. That is not weakness, that is adaptation. But I should have been stronger, for you. You are being strong now, that counts. Does it? Or am I just making everything worse? Patricia Morrison might go to jail. The HOA might collapse. Property values might crash. All because I could not just let this go. Emma reached across and took my hand, and for a moment I saw Sarah in her, my daughter who was gone, but who lived on in this fierce, brilliant girl. Grandma, you did not make this happen. Patricia Morrison made this happen. You are just refusing to be invisible anymore. And yeah, it is messy, and yeah, people might get hurt. But you know what the alternative was? You getting hurt, me getting hurt, our house burning down because there is a fire hazard in the wall, us facing criminal charges because the power company thought we were running an illegal business. She was right. Of course she was right. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were different countries, and I was still trying to find the bridge between them. The doorbell rang at 8 a.m. the next morning. I was still in my bathrobe, coffee in hand, trying to convince myself that facing the day was a good idea. Through the peephole, I saw a young man, late 20s maybe, standing on my porch with the kind of nervous energy that reminded me of students coming to apologize for plagiarism. I opened the door and he immediately started talking, words tumbling out too fast, hands moving in anxious gestures. Mrs. Chen, I am Robert Morrison, Patricia Morrison's son. Can we please talk? She does not know I am here. I let him in because something about his vulnerability made it impossible not to. He sat on my couch perched on the edge like he might need to run at any moment, and I recognized the body language. High-functioning autism, probably. The same hypervigilance I used to see in some of my students. The ones who had learned to mask their differences but carried the exhaustion of it in every muscle. I installed the Wi-Fi system, he said. The electrical connection, all of it. My mom told me it was legal. She showed me a letter she said was from your husband, agreeing to let the HOA use your electrical service for community infrastructure. There was no such letter. I know that now. Or I am starting to understand it. But at the time I trusted her. She is my mom, and she said it was approved and permitted, and I just wanted to help her. His voice cracked on that last word, and I saw him fight for control. This was someone who had spent his whole life trying to prove he could function in a world that did not make room for him. and now that world was about to come crashing down. "Robert," I said gently, "did you pull permits for the work?" My mom said we did not need them because it was emergency community infrastructure under HOA authority. I should have checked, I should have verified, but I have autism and I need structure and rules, and when someone I trust tells me something is true, I believe them. The pain in his voice was so raw I had to look away. This was not a villain. This was a victim, a son who loved his mother and trusted her, and was now facing the destruction of everything he had built. "I have a contracting business," he continued. "Morrison Electrical Services. It took me 6 years to build. I employ 2 people. We do good work, honest work, and now the State Contractors Board is going to investigate me, and I am going to lose my license, and my employees are going to lose their jobs, and I cannot breathe thinking about it." He was hyperventilating slightly, and I moved to sit beside him. Close, but not touching, because I remembered from my teaching days that some kids with autism did not like unexpected touch. "Robert, breathe. In for 4 counts, out for 4 counts. You are safe here." He followed my instructions, breathing slowing, and after a minute, he looked at me with eyes that were so young and so scared. "Mrs. Chen, I did not mean to hurt you. I did not mean to put your granddaughter at risk. I thought I was helping my mom. She works so hard. She has sacrificed everything for me. I just wanted to make her proud." "I know. Do you hate me?" The question was so direct, so childlike, that I felt tears sting my eyes. "No, Robert, I do not hate you. I am angry at what was done. I am scared by the danger it created. But I do not hate you." He cried then, silently, tears running down his face while his body stayed rigid. And I sat with him in that silence and thought about all the ways mothers try to protect their children, and all the ways that protection can curdle into something dangerous. After Robert left, I called Diane. She answered on the first ring like she had been waiting. "I need help," I said. "I need to understand what I'm doing and what it means and how to do this without destroying everyone." "Come over," she said, "and bring wine. We have a lot to talk about." Diane's house felt like sanctuary, comfortable furniture that invited you to stay, art on the walls that was vibrant and alive, the home of a woman who had decided what she wanted her space to feel like and made it so. She poured us both wine, and we sat in her living room, while the afternoon light turned everything golden. "Tell me about your marriage," she said. "Not to Tom, before Tom. The marriage you were raised into." "I do not understand." "Every woman is married before she ever meets a man. We are married to expectations, to the idea that we should be accommodating, helpful, selfless. We are married to the belief that our needs come last." "Tell me about that marriage." I had never thought about it that way, but once she said it, I could not unsee it. My mother, who worked full-time and still made every meal from scratch. My grandmother, who stayed with an alcoholic husband because divorce was shameful. My teachers, who told me I was too loud, too opinionated, too much. Every message I ever received about what good women did and who they were allowed to be. "I was a teacher for 40 years, I said. I loved my students. But I also took on every extra duty, every additional responsibility, every thankless task that no one else wanted. I thought that made me dedicated. But really it just made me exhausted. And no one ever told you to stop." "No. They thanked me for my service and gave me more work." Diane leaned forward and her eyes were fierce with understanding. "Margaret, do you know what I learned when I left my husband? I learned that the world will take everything you offer and ask for more. The only person who can say enough is you." She told me then about the women's group she had been quietly gathering. 11 women total, all of them 55 to 70, all of them living on the edges of the development, all of them with stories about Patricia Morrison manipulating them into compliance. They had been meeting monthly for 3 months, sharing stories, realizing patterns. "You are not alone," Diane said. "What Patricia did to you, she has been doing to all of us in different ways. She targets women she perceives as weak, widows especially, women without men to protect them. I'm not weak. I know that. But she saw your grief and your isolation, and she made assumptions. She was wrong. What are we going to do? We are going to give you support. And we are going to give Patricia a choice. She can make this right with dignity, or she can face the full force of our collective fury. But either way, this stops." That night, the women came to my house, 6 of them plus Diane. They sat in my living room drinking tea and wine and sharing stories, and I realized I was watching something form. Not a rebellion, something quieter but maybe more powerful. A recognition that we were not alone, that the thing we each thought was just our individual weakness was actually a pattern, a system designed to extract our compliance. Rita told about being pressured to do landscaping work after knee surgery. Joan talked about lending the HOA $5,000 that was never repaid. Linda shared her financial analysis. Sarah admitted to benefiting from the stolen electricity. Each story built on the others until the picture was clear and damning and complicated. Because here was the thing we all had to reckon with. Patricia Morrison was a bully, but she was also drowning. She was trying to save her son and save the community and save herself, and she did not know how to ask for help. So she took it instead. And that did not excuse what she did, but it complicated the question of what we did about it. Do we destroy her? Diane asked the group. Or do we find another way? The debate went on for 2 hours. Some wanted prosecution, consequences, justice served cold and complete. Others wanted mercy, understanding, a path to redemption. I sat mostly silent, listening, trying to understand my own heart. Finally, I spoke. I want her held accountable. I want my money back. I want the danger to Emma removed. I want to never be taken advantage of like this again. But I also want to sleep at night knowing I did not destroy a mother trying to save her son. I want to find the path between justice and mercy. How do we do that? Someone asked. I do not know yet, but I think the first step is talking to her. Woman to woman, truth to truth. The next morning I called Patricia and asked her to meet me for coffee. Neutral ground, public space, witnesses around. She agreed immediately, and I heard the hope in her voice, the belief that maybe this could still be smoothed over. We met at a cafe downtown, one of those places with overpriced lattes and uncomfortable chairs that encourage you not to stay too long. Patricia arrived looking put together as always, but I could see the cracks. Her makeup was heavier than usual, covering dark circles. Her hands shook slightly as she stirred sugar into coffee she probably was not going to drink. Margaret, she started, and I held up my hand. I know about the HOA money. I know about Robert's medical bills. I know about the $95,000 you put in from your own pocket. I know about the reserve fund and the impossible math and the fact that you have been trying to make this community work on a foundation that was broken from the start. She went very still. I also know that you violated me, that you put my granddaughter at risk, that you manipulated me using my dead husband's memory, that you have been targeting women you think will not fight back because we have been socialized to accommodate. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not look away. So here is what is going to happen, I continued. You have 1 week to make this right. You are going to disconnect the electrical tap safely and professionally. You are going to pay me back for every kilowatt you stole. You are going to propose a real solution to the HOA financial crisis. And you are going to do it all transparently, with oversight, asking for help instead of taking it. And if I cannot, then I go to the authorities with everything I know, the embezzlement, the electrical theft, all of it. And we let the system decide what happens to you. Patricia's hands were shaking harder now, coffee sloshing in the cup. You do not understand what it is like, being a single mother to a child with special needs, watching him struggle, knowing there is treatment that could help but not being able to afford it. Insurance companies denying everything. Having to choose between therapy that costs $4,000 a month and keeping the lights on. I do not understand that specifically, but I understand impossible choices. I understand doing what you think you have to do to survive. I understand being so tired you cannot see straight. She looked up at me and something in her face broke. I am drowning, she whispered. I have been drowning for 28 years and I do not know how to ask for help. Because if I am weak, if I am vulnerable, Robert suffers. Then learn. Learn to be vulnerable. Learn to ask. Learn that community is not about one person holding everything together. It is about all of us holding each other up. I cannot fix this in a week. Then maybe you cannot fix it alone. Maybe that is the point. I left her there sitting with her cold coffee and her impossible situation. And I felt no satisfaction, just exhaustion and sadness and the weight of knowing that whatever happened next, people were going to be hurt. The question was how much hurt and to whom and whether any of us could live with the answer. The power company's fraud investigation unit called that afternoon. They wanted a formal statement. They wanted documentation. They wanted to know if I was pressing charges. I told them I needed time to decide, and they told me I had 72 hours before they moved forward with or without my cooperation. Emma found me sitting on the porch that evening, watching the sunset and trying to find clarity in the changing light. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I am going to give Patricia a chance to make it right. And if she does not take it, I am going to let the system handle her." That seems fair. Does it? Because I keep thinking about Robert, about his business and his employees and his whole life being destroyed because his mother lied to him. Is that fair? Emma sat beside me, and we watched the desert turn purple and gold. "Grandma, I do not think fairness exists. I think there are just choices and consequences, and we do the best we can. You are trying to find the path that does the least harm. That is all anyone can do." When did you get so wise? When I lost my parents and had to grow up too fast. But I had you to show me that growing up does not mean growing hard, that you can be strong and kind at the same time. I put my arm around her, and we sat in silence, and I thought about all the generations of women who had sat like this, carrying impossible burdens, making impossible choices, trying to find the balance between justice and mercy, between self-protection and compassion. The week I gave Patricia felt like a held breath. Every day I expected her to call, to show up, to present some solution. Instead, there was silence, no contact, no updates, nothing. On day 5, Sarah called me. "Patricia showed up at my office today. She wanted to know about therapy resources for autism, affordable options." She looked terrible, Margaret, like she had not slept in days. "What did you tell her?" I told her about the programs I refer families to, the sliding scale clinics, the support groups, and then I asked her if she was okay. Was she? Sarah was quiet for a moment. She asked me if I had ever felt like I was failing everyone who depended on me. I told her yes, every day. And then she cried in my office for 20 minutes. The night before my deadline, Patricia appeared at my door. It was close to midnight, and she looked like someone who'd been running on empty for so long she no longer remembered what full felt like. She was carrying a box. "Can I come in?" she asked, and her voice was so stripped of its usual confidence that I barely recognized it. We sat at my kitchen table and she opened the box. Inside were 8 years of HOA records, medical bills, bank statements, credit card reports, everything, all of it. "Here," she said, "take it all, destroy me, I deserve it." She told me everything then. About her husband Thomas leaving when Robert was diagnosed because he could not handle a child who was different. About working 3 jobs and sleeping 4 hours a night. About her family disowning her because they thought she should institutionalize Robert. About becoming HOA president because it was the one place she had control when everything else was chaos. "I have spent 28 years being powerless," she said, "as a wife, as a mother, as a woman. The HOA was mine. It was the one thing I could manage, and I became the thing I hate. I became a bully." The weight of her pain sat between us like a physical presence. "Patricia, when did you last ask someone for help?" "I cannot. If I am weak, Robert suffers." "You are not strong, you are collapsing, and you are taking everyone down with you." She looked at me with hollow eyes, and I saw myself in her. Different circumstances, same core wound. 2 women who had learned that their needs did not matter, that sacrifice was love, that asking for help was failure. "Here is what is going to happen," I said. "Tomorrow we call an emergency HOA meeting. You are going to tell the truth, all of it, and we are going to figure out a solution together. They will crucify me, maybe, or maybe they will surprise you. Women understand impossible choices." The next evening, the clubhouse was packed. Over 100 residents, standing room only, the air thick with tension and curiosity, and the particular energy that comes when everyone knows something important is about to break. Patricia sat beside me at the front table, and I could feel her trembling. Before she speaks, I said, standing to face the community, "I want to say something. 3 weeks ago, I discovered my electricity was being used without my permission. My first instinct was to be silent, to not make trouble. But staying silent is how we got here." I looked around the room at all the faces I knew and did not know. As women, we are taught to be accommodating, to sacrifice ourselves for harmony. I am done with that. Patricia Morrison is going to tell you the truth now. All of it. We are going to listen with open hearts, and then we are going to hold her accountable. I sat down and Patricia stood. For a long moment, she just looked at everyone, and I saw her making the choice. Control or vulnerability, performance or truth. She chose truth. 8 years ago, I became HOA President because I wanted to serve this community. Along the way, I lost myself. I started making decisions without consulting you. I took Margaret Chen's electricity without permission. I embezzled $31,000 from reserves to pay for my son's medical treatments. The room erupted, but Patricia kept going, voice getting stronger. I also put $95,000 of my own money into repairs when you voted down special assessments. I worked myself into $87,000 of debt trying to keep this place from falling apart. I saw Margaret's kindness as weakness, and I used it. I was wrong. Someone yelled that she was a thief. Patricia nodded. Yes, I am, and I am prepared to face consequences. But I stood up again because I needed them to hear the rest. Patricia just confessed to embezzlement, but what she did not say is that she weaponized our socialization. How many women here have felt pressured by Patricia, manipulated, shamed into volunteering or donating or complying? Diane stood. I have. Rita stood. Me too. One by one, the women rose until maybe 20 were standing, and the men in the room were starting to understand this was bigger than financial fraud. This was about power and gender, and the ways women are taught to sacrifice themselves, and the ways that teaching gets exploited. The meeting went long into the night. Debates about mercy versus justice, about personal responsibility versus systemic failure, about what we owed to each other and to ourselves. And slowly, painfully, a path began to emerge. Not prosecution, not forgiveness without consequences. Something in between. Structured accountability with dignity, restitution with grace, justice that left room for redemption. I drove home that night exhausted and uncertain and somehow lighter. Patricia would pay back the money. She would resign. She would accept oversight. She would do community service, but she would not be destroyed. And Robert would not lose everything because his mother made terrible choices. The women's circle had held. We had found the path between punishment and enabling. The power between us, I kept thinking. Not the power she held over us. The power we held when we finally stopped competing and started collaborating. It was just beginning. The investigation, the consequences, the rebuilding. But sitting in my car in the driveway, I felt something I had not felt since Tom died. I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be, doing exactly what I needed to do, being exactly who I was always meant to become, ready. The morning after the emergency meeting, I woke to find my front yard filled with flowers. Not the kind you buy at a grocery store, but the kind people cut from their own gardens, offerings left in mason jars and coffee cans, and one very expensive-looking vase. There were at least 15 of them scattered across my porch, each with a small card attached. Thank you for showing us what courage looks like. Rita, you gave her mercy when I would have wanted blood. That says something about who you are. Joan, my daughter watched last night and said she wants to be like you when she grows up. Sarah, I stood there in my bathrobe reading these notes and crying because I had not expected this. I had expected anger from people who thought I let Patricia off too easy, or judgment from people who thought I should have stayed silent, or indifference from people who just wanted the drama to be over. I had not expected gratitude, but there was one note that was different. It came in an envelope not attached to flowers but slipped under my door sometime during the night. The handwriting was masculine, blocky, unfamiliar. You think you won. You think mercy makes you noble. But all you did was show the world that women cannot be trusted with power because when it matters, you protect each other instead of upholding justice. Patricia Morrison is a criminal and you let her walk. That is not strength. That is weakness. No signature, just venom on paper. I showed it to Diane when she came over an hour later with coffee, and the kind of determined cheerfulness that meant she was trying to keep me from spiraling. There will be blowback, she said, reading the note with the clinical detachment of someone who had seen worse. Not everyone agrees with what we did last night. Some people wanted prosecution, some people wanted blood. She handed the note back to me. The question is whether you can live with their anger. Because this is the price of the path we chose. We do not get universal approval. We get some people thinking we are heroes and some people thinking we are fools. Which do you think we are? Diane smiled, tired and real. I think we are women trying to navigate impossible situations with imperfect information, and I think that is the best anyone can do. The blowback started small but grew fast. By noon, there were posts in the neighborhood Facebook group, some supportive, some furious, all of them revealing the deep fracture that had opened in our community. The HOA had always been pleasant on the surface, everyone smiling and waving and pretending we were all fine. Now the veneer was cracking, and what poured out was years of resentment, judgment, and fear. Patricia Morrison is the thief, and Margaret Chen let her walk. This sets a precedent that crimes are acceptable if you have a sad story. Thank you, Margaret Chen, for showing that accountability can coexist with compassion. We need more of this in the world. I am disgusted. My property value is going to tank because we have a known embezzler on the HOA and everyone knows it. This is a nightmare. Margaret Chen is everything wrong with women in leadership. Too emotional, too forgiving, not tough enough to make hard decisions. That last one made me laugh even though it hurt. Too emotional. As if men did not make decisions based on ego and anger and fear every single day but called it logic. As if compassion was weakness and cruelty was strength. As if the world did not desperately need more people willing to choose the harder path of mercy over the easier path of punishment. Emma found me reading the comments and gently took my phone away. "Stop," she said. "You are going to drive yourself crazy. Half these people are anonymous trolls who were not even at the meeting. But what if they are right? What if I just enabled a criminal because I was too weak to do the hard thing? Grandma, you stood up in front of over 100 people and called Patricia Morrison out for weaponizing women's socialization. You refused to let her minimize what she did. You created accountability with boundaries. That is not weak. Then why does it feel like I made a terrible mistake?" Emma sat beside me and took my hand, and I saw so much of Sarah in her. My daughter who was gone, but who lived on in this fierce, brilliant girl who refused to let me drown in doubt. "Because doing the right thing does not always feel good," she said. "Sometimes it just feels hard." The community service started that week. Patricia Morrison, who had ruled the HOA for 8 years with an iron clipboard, was now required to report every Saturday to clean the clubhouse, maintain the common areas, and do whatever grunt work the interim board assigned. 200 hours over the next year, fully public, fully visible. I drove past the clubhouse on the first Saturday and saw her there in old clothes, scrubbing floors on her hands and knees while people walked past. Some ignored her. Some made snide comments loud enough for her to hear. A few stopped to help. I did not stop. I could not decide if helping her would undermine the accountability we had just established, or if walking past made me complicit in public humiliation. So I just drove home and sat with the discomfort of not knowing the right answer. That afternoon, Robert Morrison appeared at my door again. He looked better than the last time I had seen him, less on the edge of panic, but there was still fear in his eyes. "Mrs. Chen, my license hearing is scheduled for next week. The state contractors board wants to revoke my license for 6 months minimum. My lawyer says if I can get character witnesses, it might help." He paused, and I could see how hard this was for him. "Would you be willing to testify?" "I know I do not deserve it. I know I put you and Emma at risk. But I am asking anyway because I do not know what else to do." Oh, the request hung between us, and I thought about all the ways we punish children for their parents' sins. Robert had trusted his mother. He had believed her when she said the work was permitted and legal. Yes, he should have verified. Yes, he bore some responsibility. But did that responsibility extend to losing everything he had built? "I will testify," I said. "But I'm going to tell the truth. All of it, including the fact that you should have done your due diligence." "That is fair. That is more than fair. Thank you." After he left, I called Sarah because I needed to talk to someone who understood impossible choices. "Did I just agree to help the person who nearly burned down my house?" "You agreed to help a young man who was manipulated by his mother," Sarah said. "There is a difference. And testify does not mean lie. You can tell the truth and still advocate for proportional consequences. What if the truth destroys him? Then the truth destroys him. But at least he will know someone tried." The hearing was held in a beige government building downtown, the kind of place designed to strip away all personality and leave only bureaucracy. Robert sat at a table with his lawyer, a young woman who looked barely older than Emma and was clearly doing this pro bono. The state contractors board consisted of 3 people who had the worn expressions of individuals who had seen every variation of contractor fraud and were deeply tired of it all. The charges were read: unpermitted electrical work, installation without proper inspections, misrepresentation of authorization, potential fraud, each one landing like a stone. Robert's lawyer presented his case. Her client had autism. He struggled with questioning authority figures. His mother had shown him documentation that appeared legitimate. He had no prior complaints. His work was technically sound, even if improperly permitted. The board listened with the kind of neutral attention that gave nothing away. Then the character witnesses were called. I went first. I stood at the microphone and looked at 3 strangers who would decide Robert's fate and told them the truth. Robert Morrison installed an electrical system that tapped into my power without my consent. That system created a fire hazard that put my 16-year-old granddaughter at risk. Those are facts. I paused and saw Robert's face, pale and resigned. It is also a fact that Robert was manipulated by his mother, who he trusted. It is a fact that the work itself was professionally done, even if improperly authorized. It is a fact that when he learned the truth, he came to me immediately, took responsibility, and has been working to make it right. One of the board members leaned forward. Mrs. Chen, are you advocating for leniency? I am advocating for proportional consequences. Robert made mistakes. He should face consequences. But destroying his livelihood punishes not just him, but his 2 employees who depend on him. And it does not make my community any safer. After me came Sarah, who testified about Robert's work on her home and his integrity. Then Marcus Webb, a neighbor I barely knew but who apparently had hired Robert and found him honest. Then Diane, who spoke about the complexity of being raised by a controlling parent and learning to question authority. The board deliberated for 45 minutes. When they returned, the lead member read the decision. Mr. Morrison, this board finds that you engaged in unpermitted electrical work and failed to exercise due diligence in verifying authorization. However, we also find evidence of mitigating circumstances. Your license will be suspended for 3 months, effective immediately. You will pay a fine of $2,500. You will complete ethics training and work under supervision for 1 year following reinstatement. Robert collapsed in his chair, relief and grief mixing on his face. 3 months, not 6. Not permanent revocation. 3 months he could survive. In the hallway afterward, he found me and tried to thank me, but the words would not come. He just stood there crying silently, and I put my hand on his shoulder and let him feel whatever he needed to feel. Your mother loves you very much, I said, but love that controls is not love. It is fear pretending to be protection. I know, he whispered, I am learning. The fire marshal showed up 2 days later. Her name was Rachel Torres, and she had the kind of presence that filled a room, all competence and no tolerance for nonsense. She inspected the junction box, the wall cavity, the entire installation with equipment that beeped and hummed and displayed thermal images in colors that ranged from safe blue to dangerous red. Mrs. Chen, she said after an hour, this installation violated multiple fire codes. The heat buildup in your wall cavity could have ignited the insulation. The load balancing was inadequate. The ventilation was non-existent. In my professional opinion, you were 1 power surge away from a structure fire. She showed me thermal images of my wall, the orange and red blooms that meant heat, that meant danger, that meant Emma could have died in her sleep. Can I speak to your granddaughter? Emma was home from school, working on college applications in the kitchen. She came out when called, and I saw her face change when she saw the thermal images. Your bedroom is directly above this junction point, Rachel said gently. Do you understand what that means? Emma nodded, pale. If it had caught fire, I might not have woken up in time. That is correct, which is why I am issuing multiple citations. To the HOA for unauthorized installation, to Morrison Electrical Services for code violations, and I am requiring immediate remediation. She handed me a thick packet of documents. You did the right thing reporting this. A lot of people would have just let it go. But letting it go could have cost you your granddaughter. After Rachel left, Emma and I sat together in silence. She was shaking and trying not to show it, and I pulled her into a hug that she resisted for exactly 2 seconds before collapsing into it. I could have died, she said into my shoulder. But you did not. You are here. You are safe. Because you fought back. Because you did not just accept what Patricia Morrison told you. She pulled back and looked at me with eyes that were too old for 16. Grandma, I need to tell you something. I got into MIT. Early decision. Full ride scholarship. The news should have made me explode with joy, but there was something in her face that stopped me. That is amazing, I said carefully. That is everything you wanted. It was, but now I do not know if I should go. The college applications, the MIT dreams, the future we had been building toward for 2 years, all of it suddenly felt fragile as tissue paper. Why not? Because going to MIT means leaving you alone, and you are just now learning how to fight for yourself. What if you need me? I took her face in my hands and made her look at me. Emma Chen, you listen to me. I spent 64 years being afraid to take up space, afraid to have a voice, afraid to fight. You are not going to sacrifice your dreams because I was slow to find my courage. You are going to MIT. But what if something happens? Then I will handle it. That is what I have been learning. That I can handle things. That I do not need Tom to protect me or you to stay small so I feel needed. I can stand on my own. Are you sure? No, I admitted. I am terrified. But being terrified and doing it anyway, that is called courage. And I want you to see me be courageous so you learn that it is possible. We cried together then, the kind of tears that are grief and joy and fear and love all mixed up together. And I thought about how motherhood in all its forms is just a series of letting go, over and over, until you are left with yourself and have to decide if that is enough. The anonymous cashier's check arrived on a Tuesday, $4,847, the exact amount of my electricity theft calculated down to the penny. It came with a note typed on plain paper. Restitution on behalf of Patricia Morrison. Please accept with understanding that this does not erase the harm, but acknowledges it. No signature, no return address, no way to trace it. I called the bank. They would not tell me anything except that the check was legitimate and would clear. I called Patricia. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding exhausted. Did you send me a check for the electricity? Number 1, I do not have that kind of money. I am still trying to figure out how to pay you back in installments. Then who? I heard her intake of breath, sharp and surprised. Thomas, she said. It has to be Thomas, her ex-husband. The one who left when Robert was diagnosed. The one who remarried and started over and sent minimal child support. That Thomas. Why would he do that? I do not know, Patricia said, and there was something broken in her voice. I have not spoken to him in 3 years. 2 days later, the HOA received an anonymous donation. $31,000, deposited directly into the reserve fund with a note that said simply, "To restore what was taken." Then Robert's attorney called him to say that someone had paid his contractor board fine in full. $2,500 anonymous, no explanation. The pattern was obvious. Someone was systematically removing all of Patricia's financial consequences. But why? And who? The answer came in the form of a phone call I received from a man who introduced himself as Thomas Morrison and asked if he could meet with me. We arranged coffee at the same cafe where Patricia and I had our confrontation. And when he walked in, I recognized him immediately, even though we had never met. He looked like Robert, same eyes, same careful way of moving. But where Robert radiated anxiety, Thomas radiated something else. Guilt, maybe. Or regret so old it had calcified into personality. "Mrs. Chen," he said, shaking my hand. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." We sat, and he did not waste time with pleasantries. "I paid your restitution. I paid the HOA restitution. I paid Robert's fine. I know it is presumptuous, but I needed to do something and I did not know what else to do." "Why?" He looked at his coffee like it held answers. "Because I abandoned them, Patricia and Robert. When Robert was diagnosed with autism, I could not handle it. I did not know how to be a father to a child who was different. So I left. I remarried. I started over. I sent the legal minimum in child support and told myself that was enough. It was not enough. No, he agreed, it was not. He told me then about seeing the news coverage of the HOA scandal, about realizing that Patricia had been carrying impossible burdens alone for 28 years while he built a new life in California, about understanding for the first time the cost of his cowardice. "I saw you at that meeting," he said. I watched the video someone posted online. You gave Patricia mercy when you had every right to destroy her. That convicted me. I did not give her anything. She earned accountability. You gave her dignity. You showed her that making mistakes does not mean being irredeemable. And I thought if you could do that for someone who wronged you, maybe I could do something for someone I wronged. What do you want from me? Nothing. I just wanted you to know the money came from me. And I wanted to ask if you would write a letter to the State Attorney General's office. They are deciding whether to prosecute Patricia for embezzlement. Your voice might matter. I could have said no. Should have said no, probably. But I thought about Emma learning to write letters to MIT admissions. I thought about Robert crying in relief about keeping his license. I thought about Patricia on her hands and knees scrubbing floors while people walk past. I thought about the cost of mercy and the cost of vengeance, and which one I could live with. I will write the letter, I said. But not because you paid money, because Patricia is doing the work, and because destroying her does not heal anyone. Thomas nodded, and something in his face loosened. I am hiring her, he said, at my accounting firm in California. Remote position, $72,000 a year. I cannot undo leaving, but I can help now. Does she know? Not yet. I wanted to make sure you were okay with me being involved. This is your community, your fight. It is not my fight anymore, I said. It is our healing. And if you are willing to do the work of making amends, then you should do it. After he left, I sat with my coffee and thought about the way men could abandon their families and then swoop back in as heroes because they wrote some checks. The way women carried everything, broke under the weight, and were punished for breaking. The way the world worked and the way it should work, and the ocean between those two countries. But I also thought about second chances. About the fact that Thomas coming back did not erase 28 years of absence, but it was better than never coming back at all. About the fact that sometimes the best we can do is better late than never. The letter to the Attorney General was the hardest thing I ever wrote, harder than Tom's eulogy, harder than the email to my principal when I retired, harder than anything because it required me to hold two truths at once. Patricia Morrison committed crimes. She embezzled money. She stole my electricity. She manipulated women in her community. These are facts and they matter. Patricia Morrison was also drowning, trying to save her son, trying to save her community, making terrible choices because she did not know how to ask for help. These are also facts and they also matter. I do not want her prosecuted because prosecution does not heal what was broken. What was broken was trust, community, the idea that we could rely on each other. Prosecution makes the state the arbiter of justice. But this is not the state's wound to heal. It is ours. I recommend probation, restitution, community service, and oversight. I recommend consequences that restore rather than destroy. I recommend we remember that punishment and accountability are not the same thing. I sent the letter and then I waited. The community continued to fracture. Some people stopped speaking to me entirely. I would see them at the mailbox or the grocery store and they would turn away, making their judgment clear. You were too soft. You enabled a criminal. You let emotion override logic. Others became almost reverent, treating me like some kind of moral authority I absolutely was not. They would stop me to ask advice about their own conflicts, their own impossible choices, as if surviving my situation gave me wisdom about theirs. I hated both reactions equally. I was not a villain, and I was not a saint. I was just a 64-year-old widow trying to do less harm than good and mostly feeling like I was failing. Emma's MIT decision deadline approached, and she still had not confirmed. We sat at the kitchen table one night, with the acceptance letter between us, and I watched her stare at it like it might bite. "Talk to me," I said. "I keep thinking about everything that happened. How you almost faced criminal charges. How the house could have burned down. How Patricia was stealing from you for months, and you did not know because you were too afraid to check your own electric bill." "Emma, that is not your fault." I know. But what if I leave and something else happens? What if you need me and I am in Boston? Then I will handle it. Or I will ask for help. Those are my only two options, and I am learning to do both. But what if you go back to how you were before? Silent and accommodating and letting people walk all over you. I looked at my granddaughter and saw my daughter and saw myself and saw generations of women all asking the same question. What if I am not strong enough? What if I fail? What if I disappear? Emma, I am 64 years old. I spent most of my life being afraid of my own voice. These last few months, I found it. That does not just go away because you leave for college. You did not give it to me. You witnessed me finding it, and I will keep it because it is mine. She cried then, and I held her, and we grieved the future where she stayed close and the future where she flew away, and we chose the one that was right, even though it hurt. The Attorney General's decision came 6 weeks later. No prosecution. Patricia would receive probation 2 years, with conditions. Restitution already paid. Community service already in progress. Financial oversight mandatory. One violation, and the case reopened. The decision split the community again. Victory, some said. Travesty, others said. I said nothing because I had already said everything I had to say, and I was tired of justifying mercy to people who thought cruelty was strength. But Patricia called me the day the decision came through, and her voice was different. Lighter, maybe. Or just less heavy. You wrote that letter. I did. You did not have to. No, I did not. But I wanted to. There was a long pause, and I could hear her breathing, could imagine her in her house surrounded by the ruins of her old life and the tentative beginnings of a new one. Margaret, I need to say something. I have been doing the work, the community service, the financial oversight, the therapy Robert's therapist recommended I start. And I am starting to understand what you tried to tell me. What is that? That control is not the same as care. That I spent 28 years trying to manage everything because I thought if I held it all together, nothing bad would happen. But bad things happened anyway. Robert still struggled. The HOA still had problems. I still ended up drowning, and all my control did was make me a bully. You are learning. I am trying. It is harder than I expected. Asking for help feels like admitting defeat. Accepting that I cannot fix everything feels like failure, but I am trying. That is all any of us can do. After she hung up, I sat with the phone in my hand and thought about transformations. How they are not dramatic moments, but slow accumulation of small choices. Patricia choosing to ask instead of demand, me choosing to speak instead of stay silent, Emma choosing to go to MIT instead of staying safe. All of us choosing the harder thing because it was the right thing. The women's circle met that month and it had grown. 18 women now, ranging from 55 to 73, meeting in Diane's living room because mine was too small. We talked about the Patricia situation, about the community fracture, about how to hold accountability and compassion at the same time. Some of you think I was too lenient, I said, and I respect that. This was not a perfect solution. It was just the best one I could live with. Rita spoke up, the one who had been pressured into landscaping work after knee surgery. Margaret, I have been thinking a lot about what you said at that meeting, about Patricia weaponizing our socialization. And I realized she could only do that because we let her. Because I never pushed back when she asked me to do things I could not do. Because I thought being nice was more important than being honest. We went around the circle then, each woman sharing her reckoning with the ways she had made herself small. Joan had stayed in a job she hated for 20 years because confrontation scared her. Linda had lent money she could not afford because saying no felt cruel. Sarah had stayed in her marriage long past when she should have left because divorce felt like failure. Every story a variation on the same theme. Women taught to accommodate, to sacrifice, to put everyone else first. And all of us finally learning to question that teaching. The power between us, Diane said at the end. That is what we have been building. Not power over each other. Not power that comes from control. But the power that comes from truth and support and refusing to be silent anymore. She raised her wine glass and we all raised ours. To the women who stay, she said. Who fight, who build, who forgive, who refuse to be silent. To the women who stay, we echoed. That night, I dreamed of Tom for the first time in months. We were in our old bedroom and he was alive and healthy and smiling. You did good, Maggie, he said. I am proud of you. I do not need you to be proud of me, I told him. I need me to be proud of me. He laughed, and it was the laugh I remembered from when we were young. That is exactly what I mean, he said. You finally figured it out. I woke up, and the house was quiet, and Emma was sleeping, and outside the desert was turning from black to gray to gold, and I felt something I had not felt in 3 years. Peace. Not the peace that comes from avoiding conflict. The peace that comes from surviving it, from making hard choices and living with them, from finding your voice and using it even when it shakes. The community would heal or it would not. Patricia would complete her transformation or she would not. Emma would thrive at MIT or she would struggle. I would maintain my boundaries or I would slip back into old patterns. All of it was uncertain. All of it was ongoing. All of it required work. But I was ready for the work, ready to keep showing up, ready to keep choosing the harder right over the easier wrong, ready to keep building the power between us instead of the power over each other. Ready. 6 months slid past like water over stone, smoothing the sharp edges but leaving marks that would not disappear. Spring arrived in the desert with its brief explosion of wildflowers, and the kind of heat that reminded you summer was coming whether you were ready or not. The community had settled into an uneasy peace, the kind where people were polite on the surface, but the fractures ran deep underneath. Patricia Morrison completed her community service hours in March. I saw her there on the last Saturday, planting desert marigolds in the beds around the clubhouse while residents walked past. Some still made comments. Some still looked away. A few stopped to thank her. She had lost weight, I noticed. Her expensive clothes had been replaced with practical ones. The woman who used to run the HOA like a corporation now moved through the world like someone trying very hard not to take up too much space. I did not stop to talk to her that day. We had not spoken since the phone call after the Attorney General's decision. There was nothing left to say that had not already been said, and I was learning that sometimes the kindest thing you could do for someone was let them transform in private. Emma had been accepted to MIT back in December, and the acceptance letter lived on our refrigerator like a talisman. Full scholarship covering tuition, room and board, her dream achieved through a combination of brilliant essays and the media attention from the community internet co-op she had built. She was set to leave in August, and I was trying very hard not to think about how quiet the house would be without her. But then March became April, and Emma started getting tired. Not the normal exhaustion of a teenager finishing high school, but something deeper. She would sleep 9 hours and wake up looking like she had not slept at all. She was losing weight even though she was eating the same amount. She was thirsty constantly, drinking water like she could not get enough. I told myself it was stress, college applications, the aftermath of the HOA drama, the normal anxiety of leaving home. I told myself a lot of things because the alternative was too frightening to name. She fainted at school on a Tuesday. Her friend Lily Kim, Sarah's daughter, called me from the nurse's office, and I could hear the fear in her voice even as she tried to sound calm. "Mrs. Chen, Emma passed out in calculus. She woke up right away, but the nurse says you need to come get her." I drove to the school going exactly the speed limit because some part of me understood that if I sped, if I panicked, I would be admitting this was serious. Emma was sitting in the nurse's office looking pale and small and 16 in a way that made my heart crack. "I am fine, Grandma," she said. I just stood up too fast. The nurse was a woman my age with kind eyes and 30 years of seeing teenagers lie about symptoms. "Mrs. Chen," she said quietly, while Emma gathered her things. I checked her blood sugar with our emergency glucometer. It was over 400. Normal is between 70 and 100. I did not understand what that meant, but I understood the tone. The same tone the doctor used when he told me Tom's heart attack had been massive. The tone that meant everything was about to change. Sarah met us at the emergency room. She must have gotten the call from Lily and dropped everything because she was still wearing her white coat from the clinic. She took one look at Emma, and her professional mask slipped for just a second, long enough for me to see the fear underneath. "When was the last time you felt good?" she asked Emma gently. "I do not know," Emma said. "A while, I guess." The test came back fast. Type 1 diabetes. Sudden onset, probably triggered by stress. Emma's pancreas had simply stopped producing insulin, and her body had been slowly poisoning itself for weeks while we both ignored the signs. The endocrinologist was young and efficient and used words like management and insulin therapy and continuous glucose monitoring like they were simple things, and not a complete reorganization of everything. "This is controllable," she said. "With proper treatment, Emma can live a completely normal life, but it requires vigilance. Insulin injections multiple times a day or an insulin pump, blood sugar monitoring, dietary awareness. This is not something that goes away." Emma sat very still on the exam table in a hospital gown that was too big, and I watched her face as she processed what the rest of her life was going to look like. "What about MIT?" she asked, and her voice was so small. The doctor smiled. "Thousands of people with diabetes go to college. This does not change your plans. It just changes how you manage your health." But after the doctor left and it was just Sarah and Emma and me in that sterile room, Emma started crying. "The insulin costs $800 a month even with insurance," she said. I looked it up while the doctor was talking. Plus test strips and supplies. That is almost $10,000 a year. "We will figure it out," I said, but my mind was already doing the math I did not want to do. MIT was $38,000 a year, even with the scholarship. Medical expenses were now $9,600 a year minimum, $47,600 total. My teacher's pension was $42,000 a year before taxes. Tom's life insurance was almost gone. The house had lost value after the HOA scandal and still had not recovered. There was no way to make the numbers work. That night, after Emma went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a calculator and a spreadsheet and 20 years of retirement planning that had not accounted for raising a teenage granddaughter with a chronic illness. I could take out loans. I could sell the house and move somewhere cheaper. I could go back to work even though I was 64, and the thought of standing in front of a classroom again made me want to weep. Every option required sacrifice. Every path forward meant losing something. And for the first time since Tom died, I wished desperately that he was here not to fix it, but just to sit with me in the impossibility of it. Sarah called the next morning before I had finished my coffee. "I told the women's circle," she said without preamble. "About Emma, they want to help. Sarah, we cannot ask for charity. It is not charity, it is community. There is a difference." 24 hours later, there was a GoFundMe page I had not authorized and did not want and could not afford to refuse. Diane had set it up with a blunt description that made me cry. Margaret Chen spent her life putting others first. She found her voice fighting for what was right. Now her granddaughter needs help, and we are not going to let pride stand in the way of family. The goal was $25,000. It hit that in 6 days. By the end of 2 weeks, it was at $38,000 and climbing. People I knew, people I did not know, former students who remembered me from 20 years ago, random strangers on the internet who just wanted to help. I cried every time I looked at it. Gratitude and shame mixing together until I could not tell which was which. Rita from the Women's Circle set up a scholarship fund through the local teachers union. Linda helped me restructure our finances and find a medical cost-sharing program that would cut expenses in half. Joan connected Emma with a diabetes support group for teenagers, each woman giving what she could, doing what she knew how to do, and together creating something I could never have built alone. Sarah brought groceries one afternoon and stayed for wine, and the kind of conversation that only happens between women who have survived things. "Do you remember when I told you about my divorce?" she asked. "About not knowing how to write a check at 49? I nodded. The hardest part was not the practical stuff, it was accepting help. I had spent so long being the one who gave, who sacrificed, who held it together. Asking for help felt like admitting I failed. "You did not fail. I know that now, but it took me years, and I am watching you go through the same thing." She reached across and took my hand. "Maggie, let us help you. Not because you are weak, because you are part of us. Because the power between women is not what we take from each other. It is what we give." The envelope arrived on a Saturday. Thick, expensive paper, no return address. Inside was a cashier's check for $10,000 and a note typed on plain paper. "For Emma's medical expenses and whatever else she needs. From Patricia and Thomas Morrison. This does not erase anything, but it acknowledges our debt to the woman who showed us mercy when we deserved justice." I called Patricia. She answered on the second ring. "I cannot accept this." "Yes, you can," she said, and her voice was different, clearer somehow, like she had stopped performing and started just being. "Thomas and I have been talking," she continued. "For the first time in 10 years, we are actually talking. About Robert, about what we both did wrong, about how to do better going forward. He got me a job at his firm. Remote work, good salary. For the first time in 28 years, I am not drowning." "Patricia, that is wonderful, but I still cannot take your money." "Margaret, you let me keep my dignity when you could have destroyed me. You wrote that letter to the Attorney General knowing some people would hate you for it. You chose the harder path of mercy over the easier path of vengeance. Let me give you this, please. I thought about refusing, about pride and independence and all the ways women are taught that needing help makes us weak. Then I thought about Emma and MIT and insulin that cost more than groceries. Thank you, I said. For Emma and for me, thank you. We are even now, Patricia said. Or we are trying to be. The monsoon season came early that year. Arizona storms that arrived with no warning and turned streets into rivers in minutes. The development had always had drainage issues, something about the original construction cutting corners on infrastructure, but it had never been critical, just annoying. Puddles that took days to drain, occasional basement seepage, until the storm on the last Tuesday in May. It started at 2 in the afternoon with clouds that turned the sky the color of a bruise. By 2:15, it was raining so hard you could not see across the street. By 2:30, the clubhouse was flooding, water pouring through the ceiling, the old drainage system completely overwhelmed, 12 homes with water in their basements, and more getting hit every minute. I watched from my porch as people ran out of their houses in the rain trying to move cars to higher ground. Sarah called to check if I was okay. Diane texted to say her basement had 3 inches of water. The neighborhood group chat exploded with panic and blame and people demanding to know why this was happening. By evening, the rain had stopped, but the damage was done. The HOA emergency meeting was called for that night. Mandatory attendance. The clubhouse was packed, despite half the floor being covered in wet carpet that squelched when you walked on it. The interim board president looked exhausted and overwhelmed and about 10 years older than he had 6 months ago. The drainage system has failed catastrophically, he said. We had it inspected this afternoon. The pipes were installed incorrectly during original construction. They have been deteriorating for years. The monsoon just finished what was already breaking. How much to fix it? Someone asked. The engineer estimates $200,000, maybe more. The room erupted. Shouting, accusations, panic. Someone demanded to know why this had not been fixed before. Someone else pointed out that Patricia Morrison had tried to get it fixed 6 years ago, and residents voted it down as too expensive. The interim president held up his hands for quiet. Our reserve fund has $43,000. We need special assessment of approximately $2,100 per household to cover the shortfall. More shouting. Families saying they could not afford it. Retirees on fixed incomes. Young couples already stretched thin. The same math playing out in 150 households all at once. There has to be another way, Sarah said, standing. We cannot ask people to pay that much right now. What do you suggest? The president asked, and he sounded desperate for any answer. Hire Patricia Morrison as a consultant, Diane said. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop on that wet carpet. She managed this HOA for 8 years, Diane continued. She knows the systems, she knows the contractors, she knows how to find solutions when the budget does not work. Pay her as a consultant. Use her expertise without giving her power. Half the room loved the idea, half hated it. The debate went on for an hour. Finally, they voted, 78 to 52 in favor. They called Patricia that night. She showed up to the next day's emergency meeting looking terrified and determined and like she had not slept. The board laid out the problem, the costs, the impossibility. I need 3 days, she said. Let me look at the contracts, the bids, the options. Let me see what I can do. She came to my house on the second day. I found her on my porch at 8 in the morning holding a folder and looking uncertain in a way that was new for her. Can I ask your advice? She said. I made coffee, and we sat at my kitchen table like we were friends, even though we were not quite that and might never be. The board wants me to fix this, she said. Find a cheaper solution. Make the numbers work. And I know how to do that. I am good at it. But I am terrified of slipping back into old patterns. What old patterns? Taking control. Making decisions unilaterally. Convincing myself I am the only one who can solve things. I have been in therapy for 4 months learning to ask for help instead of just taking what I need. This feels like a test I might fail. Then do not take it alone, I said. Present options, not solutions. Give the board choices, not mandates. Be a consultant, not a president. Trust that other people can make decisions even if they are not the ones you would make. She looked at me with something like hope. Can you be at the meeting when I present? I trust you to call me out if I start controlling things. Patricia, I am not your accountability partner. Please, I need someone who will stop me if I go too far. Someone who is not afraid of me. I thought about saying no, about boundaries and self-care and all the therapy language I had been learning, but I also thought about second chances and the hard work of transformation and what it meant to really support someone trying to change. I will be there, I said, but only as witness. This is your work to do. The presentation happened 3 days later. Patricia stood in front of the same community that had watched her confession 6 months ago and laid out 3 options. Option 1, she said, accept the engineer's bid, $200,000. Special assessment of $2,100 per household. Everyone groaned. Option 2, I found a different contractor willing to do it for $148,000. Still a special assessment, but $1,700 per household instead. People leaned forward, interested now. Option 3, there is a county flood mitigation grant program. If we can prove this is part of a larger drainage issue affecting the whole area, we might get $30,000. That drops the assessment to around $1,300 per household. How long for the grant? Someone asked. Application takes 2 months. Decision takes another month. We would need to start repairs before approval to meet the deadline. That is a gamble. Yes, Patricia said. It is, which is why I am not making the decision. You are. I watched her present and saw the difference. 6 months ago, she would have told everyone which option was right, would have pushed and manipulated and made it seem like there was only one choice. Now she laid out facts and stepped back. The board voted for option 3, gamble on the grant, hire the cheaper contractor, hope for the best. After the meeting, Patricia found me in the parking lot. Did I do okay? You gave them choices. You trusted them to decide. That is growth. She smiled, and it was a real smile, tired but genuine. It is harder than I thought it would be, letting go of control. But Thomas says the same thing in therapy. That control is just fear pretending to be strength. How is it going with Thomas? Complicated. He is trying to make amends for 28 years of absence. I am trying to forgive him while still being angry. We are both in therapy. Robert is processing having his father back in his life. It is messy. Healing usually is. The flooding created strange bonds in the community. People who had not spoken to each other since the scandal found themselves working together to tear out wet carpet and dry out basements. The fracture was still there, but something was building over it. Not quite repair, but maybe the beginning of it. Emma's diabetes became routine in the way that chronic illness does. Insulin before meals, blood sugar checks throughout the day, constant awareness of her body in a way she had never needed before. She handled it with a competence that amazed me, but I could see the weight of it accumulating. We need to talk about MIT, she said one night in late June. Her acceptance letter was still on the refrigerator, but the August start date was approaching fast. What about it? I do not think I should go. Not yet. Emma, we have the money now. The GoFundMe, the scholarship, Patricia and Thomas's donation. We can make it work. It is not about money, she said, and her voice cracked. I am not ready, Grandma. I just got diagnosed with a chronic illness. I am still learning how to manage it. And honestly, I do not want to leave you alone when you are just starting to date Richard and build a new life. Richard Chen had appeared in my life in March. 68 years old, widower, retired architect, kind eyes and steady hands, and none of Tom's need to fix everything. We had met at a grief support group Sarah recommended and started having coffee, and now we're having something that might be called dating if I let myself name it that. Richard has nothing to do with your decision, I said. But you do. I watched you find your voice this year, Grandma. I watched you stand up to Patricia Morrison. I watched you choose mercy over revenge. I watched you learn to ask for help. That matters more to me than any engineering degree. She was crying now, and I pulled her into a hug. I want to defer MIT for a year. Take a gap year. Work on the internet co-op, manage my diabetes, be here while you figure out who you are without Grandpa's shadow. Is that okay? Part of me wanted to say no. Wanted to push her toward the dream we had been working toward for 2 years. But another part of me, the part that was learning to listen instead of just react, heard what she was really saying. She was not running away from MIT. She was running toward herself. And that mattered more than any timeline. Okay, I said, defer MIT. Take your gap year. Find yourself. We called MIT together that night and explained the situation. The admissions officer was surprisingly understanding. Lots of students deferred for health reasons. Emma could start the following fall with her acceptance and scholarship intact. After Emma went to bed, I sat on the porch with Richard. We had gotten into the habit of evening walks around the development and then sitting on my porch talking about nothing important. It was easy in a way my marriage to Tom never was. No pressure to perform or maintain or fix. Just two people who had survived loss learning to be present with each other. Emma is deferring MIT, I told him. Good for her, he said. Gap years are underrated. I thought I would be devastated, but mostly I am relieved. Why? Because I was not ready to be alone yet. I am just learning how to be myself. Having her here for another year gives me time to solidify that before I have to maintain it completely alone. You would not be completely alone, he said gently. You have the women's circle. You have Sarah and Diane. You have me if you want me. I do want you, I said, and it was the first time I had admitted it out loud. But I am terrified of losing myself again. Tom made all the decisions, and I let him, and I do not want to fall into that pattern with you. Then we will not let it happen, Richard said. We will check in with each other. We will be honest. We will build something different. The county grant came through in August, $30,000 for flood mitigation. The drainage repair started in September and finished in November. Total cost $118,000 after the grant. Special assessment $1,320 per household. Still painful, but manageable. Patricia consulted on the whole project, reviewed contracts, negotiated with contractors, reported to the board weekly. She did not overstep, did not take control, did not slip back into old patterns. And slowly, very slowly, the community started to trust her again. Not everyone. Some people would never forgive her. But enough people saw her transformation was real, that she could exist in the community without carrying quite so much shame. Robert's business was thriving. He had hired 2 more employees and was specializing in accessible home modifications, making spaces work for people with disabilities. He came by one Saturday to ask if he could upgrade my bathroom with grab bars and non-slip surfaces. For free, he said, to make amends. Robert, you do not owe me free labor. I know, but I want to do it anyway. Your bathroom is where this all started, with you falling and spending 20 minutes alone on the floor. Let me make it safer, please. We spent the day together while he worked, and I brought him water, and we talked about transformation, about the difference between making amends and seeking forgiveness, about how the work was its own reward, whether or not the person you wronged ever fully trusted you again. Your mom is doing really good, I told him. I know, he said. She apologized to me for using me as a pawn, for lying about the permits, for making me complicit in her schemes. That is the first time she has ever taken real responsibility. How does that feel? Confusing. Good, but confusing. I spent my whole life believing my mom was always right because she worked so hard and sacrificed so much. Learning she was human and made mistakes, that is harder than I expected. Welcome to the club, I said. The women's circle met in November, and Diane announced that we had grown to 24 regular members, women from our development and 2 neighboring ones, all of them drawn by the story of what had happened here. The fall, the confrontation, the mercy, the transformation. We were becoming something bigger than ourselves, not a rebellion, but a recognition that women carrying impossible burdens could help each other carry them. That strength did not mean doing everything alone, that asking for help was brave, not weak. Patricia started coming to the meetings in October, not as a member, but as someone doing the work publicly. She would share her progress in therapy, her struggles with control, her gratitude for second chances, and we would witness it without judgment, without praise, just with presence. This is what accountability looks like, Diane said one night. Not punishment, not shame, just someone doing the work in community and letting us see it. I thought about that a lot as the year wound down, about the difference between punishment and accountability, between shame and growth, between destroying someone and creating space for them to transform. The world wanted simple stories, villains and heroes, good and bad, justice as a hammer that came down hard and final. But real life was complicated. People were complicated, and the work of healing was ongoing, never finished, always requiring more from us than we thought we had to give. Emma spent her gap year working as technical director of the internet co-op, and it grew beyond anything I could have imagined. 67 households by December. Professional installation, legal permits, community governance. She was making enough money to cover her medical expenses and save for college. Learning skills. MIT never could have taught her. She is going to be fine, Richard said one evening as we watched Emma lead a co-op board meeting from our kitchen table. We are all going to be fine, I said, and for the first time I actually believed it. December brought the kind of cold desert nights that make you remember winter exists even in Arizona. I stood on my porch wrapped in a blanket watching the stars and thinking about the year. The falls, literal and metaphorical, the choices, the consequences, the healing that was still ongoing. Patricia had not destroyed us. I had not destroyed her. The community had not collapsed. Emma had not given up her dreams. We had all just learned to carry our burdens differently. The power between us, I thought. Not power over, not power under, but the power we held collectively when we chose truth and accountability and mercy over the easier path of judgment and revenge. My phone buzzed with a text from Diane. Emergency Women's Circle meeting tomorrow. Something big. Be there. I smiled because I knew whatever it was, we would handle it together. Ready. The Emergency Women's Circle meeting happened in Diane's living room on a Saturday morning when the December air was sharp enough to remind you that even the desert knew winter. 24 women crowded into a space meant for maybe 15, some sitting on the floor, others leaning against walls, all of us sensing that something significant was about to shift. Diane stood by her fireplace looking older than I had ever seen her, 70 years old and still fierce. But there was something in her face that made my chest tight. She was holding papers the way people hold diagnoses, like they weighed more than their physical substance suggested. A developer approached the HOA board yesterday, she said without preamble. Summit Ridge Development Group. They want to buy out the entire community, all 150 homes. The room erupted in questions, but Diane held up her hand. They are offering 120% of current market value. Cash offers. 90 days to relocate. They want to demolish everything and build luxury townhomes. I did the math in my head without meaning to. My house was worth about $780,000 now, still recovering from the HOA scandal and the drainage crisis. 120% meant $936,000, almost $200,000 profit, enough to move anywhere, enough to secure Emma's future completely, enough to breathe. But it also meant leaving this house where Tom died and where I finally found my voice. Leaving this community that had broken and was slowly healing, leaving the women in this room who had taught me what solidarity actually looked like. Why are they telling us now? Sarah asked. Right before the holidays? Diane's mouth tightened. Because they know people are stressed about money. They know families are struggling. They know Christmas expenses and property tax bills are coming. They are counting on desperation. Do we have to decide as a community? Rita asked. Or can individuals sell? The developer wants all or nothing. If we do not reach 85% agreement, they walk away. They do not want to build around holdouts. The room descended into chaos. Some women immediately calculating what they could do with that money. Others horrified at the thought of being forced out. I sat quietly and watched the fracture happen in real time. The same community that had come together to support Emma, to give Patricia a second chance, to fix the drainage system, now splitting along lines of fear and hope and financial necessity. We need to vote, someone said. No, Diane said, and her voice cut through the noise. We need to understand what we are actually voting on. This is not just about money, this is about who we are. She looked around the room at each of us. I have lived in this development for 35 years. I raised my son here. I left my abusive husband and rebuilt my life here. This place has seen me at my worst and my best. And I need to tell you all something I have not told anyone. The room went silent. I have been diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's. The developer's offer came the day after I got the diagnosis. And my first thought was, take the money and run. Move to assisted living before I forget who I am. Let someone else deal with the future. I watched tears slide down Diane's face and felt my own eyes burning. But then I thought about what we have built here. Not perfect, not healed, but real. A community where women hold each other accountable and support each other anyway. Where Patricia Morrison can do her community service and people can watch her transform. where Margaret Chen can find her voice at 64, where we learn together that mercy and justice can coexist. She held up the papers. If we sell, we lose that. We scatter. We become individuals again instead of a community. And I know some of you need the money. I know some of you want to leave. I am not saying the choice is easy. I am saying we should be honest about what we are choosing. After the meeting ended and most of the women had left, I stayed to help Diane clean up. She moved slowly, carefully, like someone learning to navigate a body that was starting to betray her. "How long have you known?" I asked. 3 months. My son wants me to move to California near him. The developer's offer feels like a sign. Or a test. She smiled sadly, maybe both. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed listening to Richard breathe beside me, his steady presence still new enough to feel like a gift, and thought about choices. Tom and I had bought this house from his uncle 10 years ago. We had planned to grow old here. Instead, Tom died, and I grew old alone, and then not alone anymore. If I sold, I could buy something smaller, something easier to maintain. I could move closer to wherever Emma ended up after MIT. I could start fresh somewhere no one knew me as Tom's widow, or the woman who fought Patricia Morrison. I could be anyone, but I had spent 64 years being whoever other people needed me to be. Did I really want to start over doing the same thing? Emma found me at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning, staring at a calculator and a spreadsheet that showed every possible future. "You should take the money," she said. I looked up surprised. "You think I should sell?" "Grandma, you fought for this house. You found your voice here. You built community here. But you do not owe this place your future. If selling means security, means freedom, means possibility, then sell." "What about the women's circle? What about Diane?" "They will understand. And if they do not, that is their problem, not yours." She sat beside me and took my hand. "You taught me that being strong is not about sacrificing yourself. It is about choosing what serves you." "What serves you, Grandma, this house or the freedom to build something new?" I did not have an answer, not yet. The community town hall happened 2 weeks later, 3 days before Christmas. The developer sent a representative, a woman in her 40s with the kind of polished competence that came from closing difficult deals. She presented glossy renderings of what the development would become. Luxury townhomes, green spaces, community amenities, a vision of the future that erased everything we had been. "The offer stands for 60 days, she said. "After that, we move to other properties. This is a limited opportunity." The debate that followed was passionate and painful. Families with young children who could not afford to stay in the area otherwise. Retirees on fixed incomes who saw their retirement dreams finally funded. People who had moved here 5 years ago and felt no attachment. People who had lived here for decades and could not imagine leaving. Sarah stood and I could see her struggling with what to say. "I am a single mother. This money would mean my daughter could go to any college without debt. It would mean I could buy a house outright instead of paying rent. It would mean security I have never had." She paused and her voice broke. "But it also means leaving the community that saved me. When I got divorced, I was broken. The women in this room put me back together. Is that worth $150,000? I honestly do not know." More people spoke, each story a variation on the same theme: need versus connection, security versus community, the future that money could buy versus the present that had cost us so much to build. Then Patricia Morrison stood. I had not seen her come in, but there she was in the back row, still dressed for her consulting work, still carrying that careful humility that came from public transformation. "I do not have a vote anymore," she said. "I sold my house last month. I'm moving to California to be closer to Thomas and Robert and to start the job he offered me." The room went silent. "But I wanted to come tonight because I owe you all the truth." When the developer first approached the board, I was the one who encouraged them to listen. I thought this was the solution. Get everyone money. Let them escape. End the community before it fractures again. She took a breath. "I was wrong. This community does not need an escape. It needs continued work. I know that is hard. I know you are tired. I know the last year has been brutal. But what you have built here, this messy, complicated attempt at accountability and mercy and real connection, that is rare. That matters." Patricia looked directly at me, and I saw everything we had been to each other. adversary and witness, victim and perpetrator. Two women learning the same lesson from different angles. Margaret Chen taught me that mercy without accountability enables, but she also taught me that accountability without mercy destroys. You do not need me to tell you what to do, but I wanted you to know that leaving feels like relief, but staying feels like courage. She sat down and I realized I was crying. Marcus Webb stood next, the retired accountant who had helped me investigate the HOA finances a year ago. I have been crunching numbers, he said, because that is what I do. And I want to present something before we vote. He pulled up a presentation on his laptop and projected it on the wall. The developer wants our land, but we also own land they do not know about or are not counting on. 15 vacant lots at the edge of the development, currently unused, owned by the HOA, appraised at $3.1 million. He clicked to the next slide. What if we do not sell our homes? What if we sell them the vacant lots with development rights? They can build 30 townhomes there, high density. Still profitable for them. We negotiate sale price at $4.2 million because development rights increase value. That is $28,000 per household distributed from HOA reserves. No special assessments for 10 years. The room erupted in questions. Marcus let them talk and then continued. But here's the important part. We negotiate conditions. They must hire local contractors, including Robert Morrison's company for accessibility features. They must use environmental best practices. They must guarantee 10% of new units as affordable housing. They get their project. We keep our community. Everyone benefits. I stared at Marcus and then at the numbers and felt something shift in my chest. A third way. Not selling out or holding on, but negotiating, creating something new while preserving what mattered. The developer representative looked shocked. She asked for time to consult with her company. The meeting was adjourned with no vote. Emma came home from her internet co-op board meeting that night glowing with excitement. Grandma, I heard about Marcus's proposal. It is brilliant. You think it will work? I think it is worth trying. And I think you should be the one to present it to the developer. Me? Why me? Because you are the one who showed this community that there is always a third path. Between punishment and enabling, between justice and mercy, between holding on and letting go. You are the voice of complicated choices. I am 65 years old. I am a retired English teacher. I am not a negotiator. Emma smiled. You negotiated with Patricia Morrison. You negotiated with the power company. You negotiated with your own fear. This is just one more conversation. 3 days after Christmas, I met with the developers team. Not their representative, but the actual decision makers. 2 men and 1 woman, all younger than Emma, all looking at me like I was a curiosity. The retired teacher who thought she could negotiate with professionals. I presented Marcus's proposal, showed them the vacant lots, explained the value proposition, laid out the conditions. They listened with the polite attention of people who were going to say no but wanted to seem respectful. Why would we do this? One of them asked. When we could just walk away and find another community that will take our original offer. Because this gives you something you cannot get anywhere else, I said. A ready-made story. Developer partners with community instead of displacing them. Builds affordable housing. Supports local businesses. That is marketing gold in an era where everyone hates developers. The woman leaned forward, interested now. We would want more units, 40 instead of 30. I shook my head. Land only supports 30 safely. Environmental impact would be too high with 40. But we would agree to a mixed-use development. 25 residential, 5 live work units for small businesses. That gives you diversity and community benefit. They looked at each other, asked for our counteroffer in writing, said they would respond within 2 weeks. I drove home shaking, not from fear, but from the realization that I had just done something I would never have been capable of a year ago. I had negotiated. I had held firm on boundaries while being flexible on details. I had advocated for my community without sacrificing my voice. Richard met me at this door and I fell into his arms and cried. I think I just saved the community, I said. Or I just blew our one chance at financial security. I do not know which. Does it matter? What do you mean? Either way you tried. Either way you showed up. That is what courage looks like. The developer accepted our counter-proposal on January 8th. They wanted the land at $3.8 million instead of $4.2. They wanted 15% affordable housing instead of 10. They wanted a 15-month timeline instead of 12. but they accepted the core premise: build on the vacant lots, leave the existing homes, partner instead of displace. The community vote happened on a Tuesday night. 132 residents attended, the highest turnout in HOA history. The vote was not close: 108 in favor, 24 against. The noes were people who genuinely needed the buyout money, and I understood their disappointment. But the majority chose staying. After the vote, Diane found me in the parking lot. She looked lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. "You did this," she said. "We did this," I corrected. "You taught me to fight. Sarah taught me to ask for help. Patricia taught me that people can change. Marcus did the research. Emma gave me courage. This was all of us." She hugged me, and I felt how thin she had gotten, how the disease was already taking pieces of her even as her mind stayed sharp. "I am moving to California in March," she said. "My son insists, and I am too tired to fight. But I needed to see this through, needed to know the community would survive. It will survive because of what you built. The women's circle will continue. Make sure it does. Make sure they remember that the power between women is not what we take from each other. It is what we give." Emma's gap year ended in a way none of us expected. The internet co-op she had built as a college project had grown into a legitimate business serving 4 HOA communities and 280 households. A regional internet provider approached her in February with an acquisition offer: $340,000. I sat with her while she processed the decision. Sell the thing she built or keep it and delay college another year. "MIT is still waiting," she said. "But this money would fund all 4 years and my medical expenses, and leave enough for graduate school. What do you want?" "I think I want to sell. Take the money. Go to MIT this fall instead of waiting another year. Build something new instead of managing something old." "That sounds right." She looked at me with those eyes that were so much like Sarah's. "Are you going to be okay when I leave?" "I am going to be terrified and lonely and probably cry a lot. But I am also going to be okay. I have Richard. I have the women's circle. I have a life that is mine." She started crying, and I held her, and we grieved the gap year that was ending and celebrated the future that was beginning. The going away party happened in August, the week before Emma left for MYT. 80 people showed up at the clubhouse: neighbors who had watched her grow up, women from the circle who had supported her through the diabetes diagnosis, Robert Morrison, who had built her a custom desk for her dorm room with special features for managing her insulin supplies, Patricia, who sent a video message from California saying how proud she was. Sarah gave a speech that made everyone cry. Emma came to us broken. Her parents were gone. Her future was uncertain. Her grandmother was learning to survive grief. And instead of just surviving, she thrived. She built a business. She managed a chronic illness. She chose a gap year, not because she was afraid, but because she was brave enough to know she needed it. Sarah looked at me, and Margaret taught her that. Margaret, who spent 64 years being small, and then decided to take up space, who fought Patricia Morrison and then showed her mercy, who found her voice and used it to negotiate with developers and save a community. Emma learned from watching that transformation. Emma spoke last. She stood in front of the microphone looking so young and so old at the same time. 2 years ago, I came here angry. Angry at my parents for dying. Angry at God for letting it happen. Angry at my grandmother for not being able to fix it. I wanted to escape. I wanted MIT to be my ticket out. She looked around the room. But this community taught me that escape is not the same as healing. My grandma found her voice by standing up to injustice. Mrs. Morrison found redemption by doing the work. Dr. Kim found friendship by being vulnerable. All of you found connection by choosing to stay when leaving would have been easier. Her voice broke. I am going to MIT now, but I am not escaping. I am carrying this with me. The lesson that community is not about agreeing on everything. It is about staying even when you disagree. It is about accountability and mercy. It is about the power between us. After everyone left, I found Diane sitting alone on the clubhouse porch. She was moving to California the next day, and this was goodbye. "You built something that will outlast you," I told her. "We built it," she corrected. "And it is not finished. Transformation is not an event. It is a practice." "Will you be okay?" "I do not know. The Alzheimer's is progressing faster than expected. I will have good days and bad days, and eventually more bad than good." But I had this. I had these years of fighting and building and watching you become who you were always meant to be. She stood and hugged me, and I felt how fragile she had become. Take care of them, she whispered. The women, they need you now. I watched her drive away and felt the weight of that responsibility settle on my shoulders. Leadership I had never asked for, a voice I had only just found, but maybe that was how it always worked. You learned to speak up for yourself, and suddenly you were speaking up for others too. The new townhome development broke ground in September. Robert's company did the accessibility consulting and hired 3 more employees. The affordable housing units were reserved for teachers and first responders and single parents. The live workspaces attracted a bakery, a yoga studio, a bookstore, an art gallery. New life growing on land that had been empty. Patricia called me in October. Her voice was different on the phone, settled, like she had finally stopped running from herself. Thomas and I are in couples therapy, she said. After 10 years of not speaking, we are trying to build something new. It is hard. I am still angry about the abandonment. He is still defensive. But we are trying. How is Robert? Thriving. His business has 12 employees now. He is engaged. Getting married next spring. He asked if you would come to the wedding. I would be honored. Margaret, I need to tell you something. I have been sober for 6 months. I did not know you were drinking. I have been drinking since Robert was diagnosed. Not falling down drunk, just maintaining drunk. 3 glasses of wine every night to numb the fear and exhaustion. I thought no one knew. But my therapist knew. Thomas knew. Robert knew. Everyone knew except me. She paused and I could hear her breathing. You know what finally made me stop? Watching you find your voice. Watching you stand up to me and then show me mercy. I realized I had been numbing myself because I thought feeling everything would destroy me. But you felt everything and survived. I wanted that. Patricia, I am so proud of you. Do not be proud yet. 6 months is nothing. Alcoholism is a lifetime thing. But I am doing the work. After we hung up, I sat with that conversation for a long time, thinking about all the ways people numb themselves. Alcohol, control, busyness, performance. All of us just trying not to feel the weight of being human. Emma came home for Thanksgiving and I barely recognized her. Not because she looked different, but because she carried herself differently. Confident, purposeful, like someone who knew exactly who she was and what she wanted. MIT is incredible, she told me over pie. Hard, really hard, but incredible. I am studying electrical engineering and computer science, building systems that can help people with chronic illnesses manage their health. She pulled out her phone and showed me a prototype. This is an app I am building. It uses AI to predict blood sugar crashes before they happen, based on diet, exercise, stress levels. It could help millions of diabetics. Baby, that is amazing. She looked at me seriously. I could not have done this without the gap year, without building the co-op, without managing my diabetes for a year first. You were right to let me defer. I did not let you, you chose it. And you supported the choice instead of pushing me toward what you thought I should do. That matters. Richard proposed to me on New Year's Eve. We were on my porch watching the neighborhood set off fireworks. Illegal but beautiful. And he got down on one knee like we were young, even though we were 68 and 65, and our knees did not appreciate the gesture. Margaret Chen, he said, I do not want to fix you or save you or make you into someone different. I just want to walk beside you while you become more of who you already are. Will you marry me? I said yes, and we stood there crying and laughing, and the fireworks painted the sky the colors of joy. The women's circle met in January, 28 members now. Diane was gone, moved to California, slowly forgetting names and faces, but still texting me encouragement in her lucid moments. Sarah had taken over as facilitator, but the group had evolved beyond any one leader. We sat in my living room because it was my turn to host, and I looked around at these faces. Rita, who had been pressured into landscaping work. Joan, who had lent money she could not afford. Linda, who had uncovered the financial fraud. Sarah, who had become my closest friend. Women who ranged from 55 to 78. Women who had learned to speak truth to each other, even when it was uncomfortable. I have an announcement, I said. Richard and I are getting married in April. Small ceremony, just close friends and family. But I wanted you all to know first. All. The room erupted in congratulations, and someone opened wine, and we toasted to new beginnings and second chances. and the strange, beautiful fact that you could find love and purpose at any age if you were brave enough to keep showing up. Later, after most people had left, Sarah and I sat on the porch wrapped in blankets. "Do you ever think about what your life would look like if you had not fought Patricia that day?" she asked. "I would probably still be invisible, still making myself small, still frozen in grief. Does that scare you? How close you came to staying stuck? Every day. But it also reminds me that transformation is always possible, that it is never too late to find your voice." The wedding happened on a Saturday in April when the desert was perfect and the wildflowers were blooming. Small ceremony at the clubhouse with 50 people. Emma was my maid of honor. Sarah read a poem about late love. Marcus walked me down the aisle because I refused to be given away like property but wanted someone to walk beside me. Richard cried when he saw me. I cried when I saw him. We were both wearing reading glasses to see our vows, and we laughed about that. Two people who had survived loss learning to build something new. "I take you," Richard said. "Not to complete me or fix me, but to witness me, to challenge me, to remind me every day that I am still becoming." "I take you," I said. "Not to defer to or depend on, but to partner with, to build with, to choose every day even when it is hard." After the ceremony, Patricia video called from California. She was at Robert's wedding celebration and wanted to share the joy. I saw Thomas in the background, saw them dancing, saw the complicated, messy beauty of people trying to heal. The epilogue to this story does not happen at a single moment. It happens in accumulation. In Emma graduating from MIT 4 years later with honors and job offers from companies that wanted to change the world. In her diabetes app launching and helping thousands of people. In her coming home for holidays with a partner she loved and a life she had built on her own terms. It happens in Patricia maintaining sobriety. In her and Thomas rebuilding a relationship that looked nothing like their first marriage but worked anyway. In Robert's company, growing to 20 employees and becoming a model for accessible design. It happens in Sarah finding love again, with a man who appreciated her strength instead of fearing it. In the women's circle, growing to 42 members across 6 communities. In Diane's death 2 years after her diagnosis, surrounded by family. Her legacy living in every woman who learned from her to fight. It happens in me teaching creative writing again. Not full-time, but as an adjunct at the community college, helping seniors write their memoirs, teaching them that their stories matter, that finding your voice at 70 is just as valid as finding it at 17. It happens in Richard and me building a partnership that looks nothing like my marriage to Tom. We argue, we negotiate, we challenge each other, we are equals in a way I never was before. It happens in the HOA functioning, not perfectly, not without conflict, but with transparency and accountability and the understanding that community is ongoing work, not a destination you arrive at. Most of all, it happens in ordinary moments, in sitting on my porch watching the sunset, in having coffee with Sarah, in video calls with Emma, in the women's circle meetings, where we continue to witness each other's transformations. 2 years after the wedding, I published a memoir about everything that happened. The fall in the bathroom, the electricity theft, the confrontation with Patricia, the community's choice to stay, the power between us. The book sold modestly, a few thousand copies. But I got letters from women all over the country saying they saw themselves in my story, that they had been making themselves small, and my words gave them permission to grow, that they had been choosing comfort over courage, and I reminded them that it is never too late to choose differently. On the 3rd anniversary of the day I told Patricia Morrison to get off my property, I visited Diane's grave. She was buried in California near her son, but I made the trip because I needed to say thank you. I sat by her headstone and told her everything. About Emma thriving, about Patricia's sobriety, about the community surviving, about me finding love and purpose and a voice I did not know I had. "You taught me that my kindness had been weaponized," I said to the stone. "You taught me that setting boundaries was not cruelty. You taught me that the power between women is stronger than any power one woman can hold alone." I cried there in that cemetery, grieving the woman who had taught me to fight and wishing she could have seen how the story ended. Or did not end, because it never really ends. Transformation is not a destination. It is a practice. I am 67 years old now. I have been married to Richard for 3 years. Emma is building a company that might change how chronic illness is managed. Sarah is in love and thriving. Patricia is sober and healing. The women's circle continues. The house where I fell in the bathroom at 2 in the morning still stands. The electric meter spins only for my power now. The junction box where Patricia tapped in has been properly sealed and made safe. Emma's bedroom sits above it, empty now but waiting for her visits home. Some mornings I stand in that bathroom and remember lying on the floor alone, too proud to call for help, believing I deserve to be invisible. And then I look at myself in the mirror. Gray hair I have stopped trying to color, lines around my eyes from smiling more than I used to. A woman who learned at 64 that it is never too late to become who you were always meant to be. The power between us, I think. Not what I took or what I gave, but what we built together. What we continue to build every time we choose truth over comfort, accountability over enabling, mercy over revenge, staying over running. That is the story. Not about a HOA scandal or an electricity theft or a woman who fell and got back up, but about what becomes possible when women stop competing and start collaborating, when we hold each other accountable and support each other anyway, when we refuse to be silent and choose to use our voices for each other. The power between us, that is what lasts.